everybody. It's your host, Steven, aka The Economistic. We are back with Season 2 of the Multiverse Experience Podcast. I'm super excited to be here for another season. Last season, we carried 22 episodes strong, but it's now time for things to change. As you can see, I'm now by myself. Alec has gone his separate ways, but that's okay. We've got an incredible season ahead of you, and we're going to have a few changes here and there. The primary one being, as much as you know, I might love to monologue and share everything that I have to say, we're going to be bringing in a bunch of guests this season. As you saw in the last season, we had interviews from lots of CEOs, but we really never had any featured guests from the MultiversX community, and no founders of NFT projects, anything like that. So definitely going to be implementing some changes for the new season, Season 2 Multiverse Experience Podcast. And I also want to talk about the name for just a second, because MultiversX, the blockchain, is the primary focus of this channel. You're going to learn a lot about it today. But the emphasis is now the multiverse with an E at the end, not the X. So what is the multiverse? So this is going to be a question that I propose and to ask each and every one of the guests that we have. So as you saw maybe in the thumbnail or the title, today we are honored to have Crypto Div as our first guest for Season 2 of Multiverse Experience Podcast. And I tell you what, folks, this is a jam-packed episode. I told Div, and as I'm telling all the other guests, hey, we've got, maybe 20 or 30 minutes for you to fill, and beyond that, we're going to carry some of the traditional vibe from the podcast that you would expect in the previous seasons. But Div had just so much to share, so as you can see by the length of this video, this is a doozy of an episode, but stick around because the conversation is extremely insightful. Div has so much to share, and he certainly deserves your follow. So hit him up, the links are in the description below. But we're going to go ahead and get into this episode. What can you expect from today's episode? Like I mentioned, we're going to have Crypto Div on the channel. He and I carried a conversation for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So thank you again, Div, for that awesome insight that you gave. I'll post some notes on the discussion as well after we get going. Beyond that, lots has changed since the last episode of the Multiverse Experience. And I am here to inform you that X Day 2023 has been announced. There's a lot of excitement building in the MultiversX community, and this is just really the beginning of it. As we saw last year, we were podcast Elrond as well as Elrond Network, and the X Day in Paris, France, Benjamin announced the whole change to multiverse to the power of X. So I think that this name has really grown on a lot of people. It had some skepticism at the beginning, thinking that they were just hopping on the metaverse train and so forth. But you know what? I think that it was a powerful move. We're not going to talk about the idea of the Lord of the Rings, how it included Maiar and Elrond, because there was maybe some impact on the name Elrond Network and some of its key decentralized apps that led them to change the name. That's not the point, that's not the focus, because we are here now, year 2023, and we have MultiversX. And I tell you what, we are still very excited for two main applications that were announced last year at X Day, X Worlds and X Fabric. So each of these things, the X Worlds is going to be a metaverse. We don't know very much about it at all, and X Fabric, it seems as though will be the means for entities of sorts to deploy sovereign shards on the MultiversX blockchain. So these are two really important dApps and features that were announced last year at X Day. And what can I say? A little bit in Elrond Network, MultiversX fashion. We've had some delays, we've had some timeline adjustments, but as we have had X Day 2023 announced, there's a lot of energy building. On today's episode, we're just going to really dive into a few high-level things because CryptoDiv gave us so much to talk about and fill this episode. I'm just going to focus on a few things here and there that are relevant on the multiverse ecosystem. And that first thing, we'll just dive right into it, was the town hall. So on your screens in front of you, you should be seeing the recap that I made of the town hall, so I'll go ahead and leave that link in the description. I just want to highlight a few things. So Benjamin began the meeting by talking about this idea of the market is kind of a weighing machine, a voting machine, and this perfectly aligns with everything I've ever talked about and tweeted about or made videos on about the market. It's not something that can be predicted. It's like looking into a crystal ball and pretending that you know the future. So he calls it this manic depressive type of beast where emotions run high. And the high level look at the town hall, in the past there have been times that the town hall was kind of this meeting place for announcements to be made, but after this final one that we had just a couple weeks ago, I'm almost certain from now on that really the town halls are very much just going to be points of alignment, giving the community a chance to see Benjamin and whoever else might be on the town hall, but really just kind of align, be reminded of the nature of the markets, be reminded of the nature of building, as he talked about so much in his discussion of the town hall. But yeah, a lot of the focus of the town hall kind of was all around what's to expect from X Day. Talking about bridges, talking about state officials, tech giants, discussing the economy, digitalization, energy regulation. All of these things are going to be present in the conversation at X Day. And I think it's also important to note that Benjamin did talk about there will be announcements that will be made. I think that's expected. But he tried to give us an idea that the announcements, there isn't a big deal in the announcements themselves, rather the implications that they kind of bring. So yeah, I highly recommend for you to check out this post that I made that kind of recaps the different elements. Below, I also included a reorganized version of my notes that were a bit messy. But nonetheless, this town hall was really great to just realign, hear from Benjamin about what's going on. And yeah, it seems like a lot of focus is towards X Day right now, and my feelings, my impressions are very much that the X Day is going to be the pivotal moment every year. So that leads me to question, well, how often will we be getting updates and announcements throughout the regular year? If X Day comes around once a year, as they do with Apple events, and I think Tesla has some yearly events event that they release new things that are coming up. But of course, Samsung, Apple, some of the flagship tech companies definitely make a point of talking about the new release. So I think that this X Day for a MultiversX is really going to become more and more important, more pivotal, and I'm looking forward to who else will be in the X Day lineup. So I guess while we're here talking about X Day, you can get tickets now, xday.com, 3-day conference about blockchain, AI, fintech, and regulation. So as we know, the event last year in Paris, France was a whole lot of fun. I was there, and I'm working on getting there this year again, but due to the nature of the markets, things are a little bit crazy. We'll do our best to be there, but as you can see, and as you might know already, the X Day 2023 will be at the Palace of Parliament in Bucharest, Romania. So MultiversX is bringing it home to Romania for their second X Day event, X Day 2023, also boasting a hackathon, which is going to be a very important piece, as was mentioned earlier today in the DeFi Twitter space. So we'll get into that just a little bit more. But yeah, a lot of excitement around the X Day 2023. They're already saying 3,000, are expected. Lots of, you can read these metrics in front of you. You don't need me to read them for you. But I just want to read this, that X Day is a meeting point for the most relentless builders, creators, and passionate explorers who choose the narrow path to change the course of history. I really like that verbiage because the nature of blockchain, I believe, is so pivotal, and it's such a disruptor of economies, of sociology, of the traditional ways of doing things, that very much so this is a movement that will and is changing the course of history. So I want to talk about this a little bit later, but we have US based educators that will be present speaking at X Day. I think that's really important. Sebastian Berduja, he was at X Day last year, the Romanian Minister of Energy. Shout out to XMEX energy holders out there. Anytime I see energy, I always want to give a shout out. Hashtag MEX1. If you know, you know. Anyway, beyond this, we've got many more speakers that are being announced on a daily basis. So definitely give MultiversX and the team a follow on Twitter, so that you don't miss a beat, and head over to xday.com. Check out each of these individuals that will be speaking at X Day this coming October 21st. This is a massive lineup, and already we have more speakers coming soon. So you can get notified, you can keep on track with what to expect, and let's hear it in the comments. If you're going to be at X Day 2023, let us know. It sounds like it's going to be a really fun time, and I hope to make it myself. As I mentioned, I'm still kind of working on getting my finances in a row. Nonetheless, let's move on to the next piece of our agenda today, which is another element that was a communal outreach, I would call it. And I'll post the tweet in the description, because Benjamin made a tweet 3 or 4 weeks ago that there were going to be several different sessions where the community could listen in, could participate via question and answer, and so forth. And this is the second one. I just told you we just went through the town hall, but shout out to Classic Main here, who has given us a recap on the dev meeting. And I've got 13 major takeaways. I'll, again, leave this tweet in the replies, or rather in the description below. But some of the highlights, the block latency reduction. They plan to lower the block latency to 3 seconds. They initially promised that it was going to be down to 4, so it's pretty awesome to see that they are now aiming for 3 seconds. Any bit of efficiency we can come to appreciate, that's for sure. So beyond this, cross-shard transactions. So cross-shard transactions will be reduced to 8 seconds, which is a significant improvement from the promised 12 seconds and the current 30 seconds. So another improvement on what was being promised. Initially was 12 seconds, but now they're saying that it'll be 8, and right now it's apparently 30 seconds. So keep it going down the list. Parallel processing. The team is working on implementing parallel processing within a shard, which will use the hardware of the nodes more efficiently. More efficiency improvements, always love to see that. So archiving unused contracts, a proposal to archive unused contracts to reduce storage costs. Specific criteria will determine when a smart contract can be archived. Archived contracts will fall with an error, but can be re-enabled on-chain as at a cost in gas. So I could keep going here, but I'll probably just make a tweet about some of these other things. But another highlight was definitely the fully sharded automatic market making DEX, aka X Exchange. So the development of a fully sharded AAM DEX through concentrated liquidity contracts is nearing completion. So that's really exciting. And in the in the DeFi meeting today, Robert Sasu, one of the lead software developers of MultiversX, was talking about X Exchange and how they don't really have any announcements, but come X Day, they will be re-informing us of the changes that have been made. It sounds like we have a new X Exchange application update, major update that will be rolling out and announced at X Day. So this prolongs prolongs that conversation, this question of where are we in the process. For those of you that were aboard the Maillard DEX bootstrapping in November 2021, going on 2 years now, many of us still own the MEX token. Many of us have bought more. We have perhaps even migrated to the new XMEX Energy, which comes with a slew of different benefits and utilities that I really like what they have right now, especially considering what MEX was and locked MEX was from the start. So over a year ago, whenever they did announce the DEX 2.0 as well as the XMEX improved tokenomics, this was something that the community was really happy to see. Now, unfortunately, the bear market has continued, and we're going to take a look at the markets briefly here for just a second, or rather in just a second, but it's no surprise, most likely to you, that we are still in a bear market. The price of e-gold is nearing the $20 mark, and yeah, that's a rough place to fall, considering that the all-time highs of the 2021 bull market were $550, give or take. So considering the losses that if you were exposed to the market over the past 2 years, yeah, it's been pretty devastating. It's been pretty difficult, but shout out to everybody who is here right now, whether you're a content creator, whether you're an educator, whether you're a builder, a developer, or everything in between, right? Because it really does take an army to come along and create energy and create this sustainable idea of community, because community is people are emotions, relationships, and that's what has led me to Twitter, finding the Elrond community back in October, November 2021 as the DEX was launching, and wow, there are people here. There's a community, an Elrond Network community, and the bear market has been rough. It's been very rough, and I'm just I'm speaking to you, listener, because yeah, the fact that we still have all of these people and we have more things that are being built. This is really just the picture of the markets. CryptoDiv, once we get to that portion of the video, CryptoDiv talks a whole lot about this and such wise words that he had to share. But there is, these investments that we're making in MultiversX and so on. I mean, these are investments in startups. It should not be mistaken, but the problem is the issue is that whenever price goes crazy, whenever there's pumps and emotions and dopamine and endorphins and all those good feelings start to fill us with confidence, that's the time to be kind of reevaluating. But here at this point in the bear market, there's just a lot of foundation being built. It's easy in those moments to forget that things do move very slowly, and when it comes to building, there's so much that can be done. There's so much to be done. The process never really ends of improving, of receiving feedback, of receiving criticism. But nonetheless, there's still something very strong to be said about sticking it out and remaining in focus and present to make sure that you don't miss a beat during the bear market, because that's when some of the most valuable times are to accumulate. So do not be mistaken by the price increases and so forth. These are still startups that we're investing in, and therefore bring along with them a great deal of risk. So make sure to manage that risk soundly, but also remind yourself that without any risk, you're going to have a reduced reward. High risk, high reward, but also high exposure to loss. So this is why it's such an ideal time to be focused and, in my opinion, accumulating some of these digital assets right now. Look at how much percentage they have fallen from their all-time highs, and consider the idea of buying at all-time highs. So the first step of accumulation or buying truly for me always begins with the question, am I buying at an all-time high? And if the answer is yes, as much as the pressure wants you to, push that buy button, think twice. And I'm preaching to myself here as well, because I have been in the place where I've bought all-time highs, or even just reallocated and rather forgotten to take profits at all-time highs. So a fundamental rule of trading is a bit twofold. So it's very simple that one should buy you should buy into weakness, because when you buy into weakness, that means that people are trying to get rid of these prices. People are taking a price. They just want the liquidity, so they're selling out. So buying into weakness versus selling into strength. When people are selling into strength, they're taking profits. So if you view it the other way around, buying into strength, you're likely going to be buying a top. A strength, a move of strength is going to entice you. It's going to look like it's going to keep running and never running. But on the other side of that, imagine if you sell into weakness. It's like that. To me, you're going with the overall market. I mentioned and reminder about Benjamin, what he said about the nature of markets. They're a bit of a weighing machine, a weighing and voting machine. Just objectively, whenever you're selling into weakness, you're just kind of accepting the fact that you're losing in a way. So next up on our to-do list, let's push on into this morning's DeFi meeting. So I paid attention to this as well and created a little note piece, a tweet here covering what was discussed in the discussion today. It was an informative meeting, but I think the emphasis here was really just getting behind the minds of a builder, especially when it comes into consideration these different protocols. We've got Hatem as well as AshSwap, two of the leading dexes on MultiversX, doing really cool things. But I also want to give a shout out to OneDex as well as JewelSwap, two other protocols that I think are really here to build and really staking their claim as making MultiversX their home. There was a lot of good stuff that was shared on the meeting this morning, and I want to highlight here the 1 + 1 does not equal 2. Of course, this is a bit of an analogy, a metaphor, whatever you want to call it, but this was in the conversation of basically defining DeFi and MultiversX, and key attribute of DeFi is this idea of composability, which means, for example, AshSwap comes along, and Neil, the CEO, actually discussed on this during the space this morning. He said at the beginning, they had very little liquidity, very little users that were coming along and interacting with AshSwap. But as more DeFi was being built on MultiversX, it's very exponential the way that different DeFi protocols can come along, and using each other's platforms and protocols, they can make new services, new ideas, and the idea of 1 + 1 not equal 2, but rather the 1 + 1 can be two different things coming together, and they can expand a vast array of different offerings. So this was interesting to consider in light of where we are in MultiversX, and we're seeing more people build, but it's all going to be very exponential, the way that these different ideas can come along and stack to make the entire ecosystem so much more powerful. So another thing I want to highlight, and this is something that needs to be highlighted much more often in MultiversX, I would say has to do with what Robert Sasu, key developer at MultiversX, which you can see here. He has changed his profile picture to a Super Victor NFT based on the Web3 Chess arena, which I'll touch on later on. But yes, so all of the team members are going to be having NFTs as their profile pictures. So love to see that, spreading the love, spreading awareness about some of these NFT projects. Nonetheless, back to what I was saying about what Robert had to say. He just talks about how much simpler and safe it is to build on MultiversX. This has a lot to do with the tokenization and how all of the tokens that are on MultiversX are done so at the protocol level. So this makes things extremely secure, and it makes building and interacting with smart contracts much easier. He likened the components of DeFi on MultiversX similar to that of Lego blocks, where developers can progressively build their financial empire. And as this brings back into the conversation, the composability, this allows different protocols, different ideas to, interact, to stack, and to create new exciting offerings. There are some challenges that are still present when it comes to building on MultiversX. Hearing from the CEO of both AshSwap and Hatem, both of them had to go through difficult, groundbreaking roadblocks towards the beginning, and they referred to the idea of infrastructure as well as some indexing that they needed to basically build from the ground up. So I have no computer scientist background, but each of those things, I can assure you that if these high-level programmers are having some rough time with them, I think it's clear that for the team to hash those out and provide solutions, it's going to be really helpful. So that was a lot of fun to just listen in on this conversation from these hardcore builders, and there was a lot of insight given, but no real alpha was given. I think it was either Robert Sasu, or it may have even been the builder, the founder of Arda, which is a DeFi program on MultiversX, and that was Lucas Willem. So he talked about the idea of X Exchange having a new feature, a new version that will be coming released on at X Day, as I mentioned earlier. I'll leave this in the the description, so you can read and re-listen back to each of these awesome conversations, the town hall, the builders meeting, as well as this morning's DeFi meeting, building a strong DeFi ecosystem. So while we're here discussing the different things to listen back and learn about MultiversX and what's being built and so forth, as you can see here, xSpaces had a really cool live space featuring Robert, the core developer, Robert Sasu, the core dev from MultiversX, as well as the founder of Radix, who is Dan Hughes. So I only caught a bit of this conversation, but as you can see below, all of the timestamps have been included. So huge shout out to DB Crypto and Radrisi, which are the two guys who kind of started this xSpaces. So give them a follow, and again, check the description to read more and rather listen about this really interesting conversation that turned into a bit of a debate between Robert and the founder of Radix, the Dan Hughes character. So keeping pushing along. We will go ahead and just give a short market update, because it's always important to check that out and see what we got going. Because today the Bitcoin price is showing some strength, but altogether, man, these markets have been tough. They have been relentless. We don't know if or when this bear market is ever going to end, but I can assure you that when it does end, it will end with a vengeance. And I think that the laws of motion very much come into play here. And what I mean by that is the high highs make up for the low lows, make up for the high highs. So as we saw in the last bull market, we saw an immense appreciation from the COVID lows, from about $4,000 all the way up to, we'll just call it $70,000, even though everybody wants to hear me say 69,000. All right, 69,000. We'll call it what it is. What an immense bull run that was, and whether it be the lows of the prior bear or bull market that brought us first to $20,000 in December 2017. That led us all the way back down to retest lows of about $3,000. So if we were to time based off of that all the way to the top that we saw in November 2021, we are looking at 35 bars, 35 months of bull market. So despite all that time moving upwards, it's pretty mind-blowing that there can still be just a short period of time for all of those gains to be wiped away. So definitely a lesson in taking profits and being careful with the capital that you do have. So beyond this, as we zoom in here, I mean, the gains from the year have been close to doubling, but there has been a lot of fear in the market as we have been consolidating down this range around the $25,000 level. So I just want to bring your attention to the MACD, which is moving average convergence divergence. And you can see here that the nature of this market has not been this bearish since we were in the early stages of the last bear market last year, over a year ago. So right now we are looking at a decrease in volume and an increase in price. So I am very bullish as per usual, but there also remains this high risk of this being, just a bear flag, an upwards channel that eventually breaks down. So what will happen, we don't know. Of course, I think it could be expected to retest those lows of $16,000, but at the same time, all of these indicators, to me, especially the fact that we've been consolidating so tightly at this previous range that allowed us to move up and out, each of these tests that move higher, these are extremely indicative of a bull market activity. And especially the most impactful element of a bull market are these shakeouts to the downside. Whether it be earlier this year in January, we saw harsh decline into that middle Bollinger Band on the weekly, only to move up to make a higher high. So this is very tough to play these markets, especially whenever there's so much skepticism and disbelief from the prior the bear market that we've been in for so long. So I'm a perma bull. I think that there's so much value in what's being built, and especially over the past year alone, MultiversX is making it clear that they are here to stay. They are here to build something very powerful. And excited to see what X Day brings out of that. So what are we going to get here? Are we going to get a retest of the yearly all-time highs? I believe that if we do start to move bullishly out of these ranges, I fully expect for us to make yearly all-time highs. Literally just yesterday, we saw this retest that, tested these breakdowns lower and lower. And here we are riding what would be called a bullish engulfing candle, where yesterday's losses, this red candle here, are being overlapped entirely and more by today's price action. So this to me is very indicative of positive bullish underlying momentum. And the market is overall in disbelief. And I have lost a lot of portfolio value because I'm perma bullish, but that's okay because I've been here for so long. I know how quickly these markets can turn around. I know how quickly a underwater portfolio can quickly become turn green and become very profitable. So I think at this point, the focus should be on accumulation and should be on the idea of, all right, if I am taking profits, how am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? So just to bookend that conversation of the market, I want to go ahead and direct your attention to Bob Loukas, who is such a impressive content creator on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it. I will also leave a link to this video in the description. But Bob Loukas, he has a large audience of multiple hundreds of thousands, and it's just this idea of the first scare, of this feeling of, oh my goodness, like the market has appreciated since the year to date price of, what was that, around $15,000 we touched around at the end of last year. So there's a lot of risk still baked into this market because perhaps you've been waiting to accumulate because you still think that we're in a bear market. So what are you waiting for this level to be retouched, like all of these levels to be retouched? I'm not really sure, but Bob Loukas is a very wise, level-minded trader who used to trade commodities and so forth, and now he has directed his expertise to the crypto markets. So my takeaway from Bob's video was, even though I appreciated the fact that his overarching attitude was bullish, talking about I'm bullish on crypto and Bitcoin because minute after minute, every 10 minutes, new blocks are made. The validators are continuing to come. But I just, my word of warning was, again, whether it be me, whether it be Bob, whether it be anybody, these are essentially just random people on the internet, and they are protecting themselves from lawsuit, but also they're being conservative about their own portfolios as well. The last thing anybody wants to do is give anybody true financial advice. So go ahead and watch this video from Bob. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I will definitely be catching Bob's next video to see kind of, in light of these market moves, what's going to happen, what's Bob's response going to be, because I will tell you that in 2017, 2018 bear market, Bob was basically warning us that the price was going to go down further, and I took his notion, his attitude, and I moved out of position only for to miss in this was 2018. Bitcoin basically moved from that $3,000 level we looked at earlier all the way up to $12,000 to $13,000. So because of I'm taking responsibility, because I looked at Bob and I heard what he was saying. I moved out of position because I thought that the market was going to go down based on what he said. The market instead went the opposite direction, and I think that I was able to get a little bit of profits off of that first move out of that bear market in 2018, but I was out of position. And at that point, I told myself, I'm not going to sell. I'm not going to take profits, even though I do take profits. The idea is maintaining maximum exposure. The idea is accumulating that passive income and compounding your interest. So directing just a final kind of conversation here, covering a few key aspects of what else is going on in the MultiversX ecosystem. I'll put this tweet again in the description because I'm excited to see that there will be some USA-based educators at X Day. Here we see Alex Tabarrok, who is a professor of economics at George Mason University, which I believe is in Virginia. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. And altogether, I really love the notion, the feeling of US educators will be present at X Day. This makes me feel like, MultiversX is acknowledging what is the United States. And to me, I'm not focused so much on the regulatory side of things as much as I'm really focused on the opportunity for education and the opportunity for financial literacy to be brought in to the education system. And given the nature of cryptocurrency, blockchain, the way it reformats the financial railways, I think that there's just a huge, massive opportunity for the education system to really embrace teaching students, right? Students, whether it be kindergarten through 12th grade or higher education into your university. It's been a long question of myself and others. Why aren't we taught about crypto, or why aren't we taught about financial aspects, how to build a budget, how to pay taxes? What these are necessary elements of living a healthy life, because what happens in your head affects your finances and vice versa. So it's like, why aren't we getting the education that we need? So I'm personally really excited to see this move up and out of the prior paradigm of traditional finance, of centralized finance. Yeah, really looking forward to what Alex here has to bring to the conversation. And I must say, kind of just closing on this idea, the world's economy, and these are my words that I wrote here. I write that the world's economy is hanging on a thread because financial planners are fiduciaries, meaning that they give advice in the best interest of their client. But fiduciaries are only giving this advice based on the trust of the United States to pay its debts. So the markets within the United States are very complicated, and it's easy to look past the reality of the fiat currency and its implications on the financial planning industry. All of these things are hanging on a thread, and if the fiat currency really becomes to be questioned or doubted by its people, by its government, by its holders, the implications, the negative feedback loop could be very impactful to the economy, to our society. So definitely something to keep our heads on about, and more importantly, share with your friends and family about some of these things. The United States isn't on a gold standard anymore. Many people don't even know this, but it's important not to use fear as a tactic, because fear to me is a weak point. Rather, we should stress on the emphasis of what this opens, new opportunities that are created whenever we do use this new form of technology. So get excited about it. There are some realities that expose opportunities for blockchain to come in and kind of fix the previous system. But I always think that the best sales tactics are ones that emphasize what's best and what we can all grow and improve upon using this new technology. Alrighty, and last thing I want to cover before we get into our conversation with Crypto Div, I want to give a shout out to Chessication as well as MultiversX, who were awesome enough to put together this Web3 chess arena. So I'll leave a comment or rather, I messed it up again. I will leave a link in the description, because all of these team members here, you should follow them, give them your support. But also too, it'll be pretty cool to see each of them having PFPs that are NFTs on MultiversX. So it seems as though there's a little bit of drama considering the choosing of some of these NFTs, but these are being implemented slowly but surely, as I already mentioned to you. Robert Sasu is doing one of these super victors as his PFP. So that's really all that I have to cover for today's episode, because we've got such a long conversation to dive into with Crypto Div. So without further ado, I want to throw it over to that conversation. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy this conversation between Crypto Div and myself. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you at the end of this video for a little goodbye message. So, we'll see ya. All right, everybody, it's without further ado that I am pleased and honored to present to you the very first guest of the Multiverse Experience Podcast. As you can see, I'm here with DivXMaN, or Div for short, a TA, investing thinker, responder extraordinaire. Div, I love your content on YouTube, just always straight to the point and objective, but subjective whenever you want to kind of talk about your own feelings, how you're feeling, bullish or bearish. But thank you so much for being willing, for your time to be here, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words about the content I put out too. Mainly, I always just try my best to be as objective as I can. And there's a reason for that, dude. There's many years before I started making videos where I was watching other people's videos all the time. And that's one thing that I learned was missing, right? Most of the videos I see, we're pushing certain things without looking at markets in general or anything macroeconomic. So that's why I went the objective route. That's just naturally how I think.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. I can definitely get to be on the chatty side. And I don't know, I get excited easy. I'm a bit of an emotional person. So I've definitely had a habit of opening up the charts and just getting excited. And yeah, I mean, the bearish perspective tends to be kind of that wiser perspective, I would say, protect your capital, be conservative, accumulate if that's what you're kind of going for. But yeah, I mean, some verbiage that you always have used that I take note of is just like, this is what the chart is reading. And I think that that's just a really great way to put it, because I think that there is like objective data, like there's an objective kind of narrative storyline and data that all of the different indicators can kind of share about. And I think you do a very good job of noting some things and then providing things that might even, kind of go against what you're reading and just kind of challenge your own hypothesis. So obviously many people on the internet appreciate your perspectives.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's kind of the goal of it. It's just to get people to think and to use the charts as a tool, not as the be all end all. There's way too much more. There's too many more variables with any type of analysis. And for anyone out there who's just looking at the charts and investing based on that, or selling or buying based strictly on the charts without knowing about the markets and industries, they're making mistakes. So I'm trying to make sure people don't do that, because coming into this, that's how I was exposed to it by a lot of the people who are still very prominent in TA, right? It's rare that they talk about all the market conditions only once the SEC started going after crypto. Now more people talk about it. But 2 years ago, when I started making videos, I was one of the few that were really talking about monetary policy and, global economics, commodity prices, all those kind of things.
Yeah, love it. And we're going to get into that, all those macroeconomics, some traditional variables. But yeah, I mean, here we are, September 9th, a beautiful Saturday over here. I think you mentioned you got some thunderstorms. But yeah, so here we are. And because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what's coming. We're just in the thick of a bear market, which, despite the fact that Bitcoin has doubled off of its December and I guess even November 2022 lows. Yeah, I'm just going to open it up for you and for all of the viewers out there, just to provide a little bit of context here. This chunk will really just be spotlighting what Div and whatever guest is going to be with us. What do they have to say? My speaking, I'll do my best to be minimal, maybe providing some thoughts along the way. But yeah, with that being said, Div, here we are how about we start there? Are we in a bull market or are we in a bear market? And tell us some more about your broad crypto perspective, and then we'll kind of go from there.
So I think just looking at everything that's happening in the world and in all global markets at a large scale, right? You look at where everything was during the height of the bull market and where everything is today. And I think it's still quite clear that we are in the bear market, but we are at the phase of the bear market where we are starting to see signs of that bear market transitioning, right? And it's not even to the point yet where it's becoming a bull market. It hasn't happened yet. We've seen enough appreciation that, you can tell that, okay, there's things happening in the background that are causing liquidity to come in and causing markets to rise. Now, this doesn't apply specifically to the stock market and other markets in the United States, because if you look at those are still relatively high compared to their highs, right? So they're doing fairly well. It's just individual sectors that are really impacted. So right now, I have to look at things in two ways, crypto independently and then globally what's happening. And I think globally, the only reason markets are really doing decently right now, they're starting to pick back up, in my eyes, is because people don't have another place to put money to generate yield. That is one of the biggest problems. You don't get yield from bank accounts. You don't get yield anywhere, basically. Right now, if you want to earn interest on your money in a safe way, so not putting your money into a DeFi platform and staking it, which is a lot of people in our industry will do that. Most retail investors do not do that. That's considered very high risk. So what they'll usually do is go for money market accounts, or they'll go for, accounts that give them some type of yield without the significant risk of putting money in the stock market. And right now, with yields, being quite low, unless you're going into like a 10-year treasury bond, you pretty much have to put your money in the stock market. And I think that's leading to a good amount of liquidity, keeping those prices up. And I think there's also a lot of manipulation there from bigger players. And that happens all the time. As far as DeFi and crypto, so Bitcoin and then all the altcoins, I think what is happening there now is the transition. And I think people are starting to see that because, there's reason things are happening. Timing is very important. Right. So one of the things that I do when I analyze things is I look at what are the major events coming up in the next year and how are those going to factor in to the decisions that are being made by policymakers and investors. Right. So one of the big things that's going to be happening just on the scale of Bitcoin, just Bitcoin itself, no DeFi included, is the halving. That's coming up in April, right? So in April, we have the halving. We have previous market cycles of data that show us what happens to the influx of liquidity, the prices over the course of the next year, how it correlates with the bull market. Now, a lot of people think that the only ones looking at this are guys like me that are doing TA on YouTube. That's not true. Financial analysts are doing exactly what I'm doing, but they're getting paid tons of money to do it inside Wall Street firms, right? Yeah. So BlackRock is not coming into the Bitcoin space so aggressively at this specific time. Fidelity, all these other companies, they're not coming in and trying to get things approved in a timeline that falls right in line with the halving for no reason, right? It's not a coincidence. It is 100% a planned item. What they're trying to do is to get into this bull market before it kicks off and to give investors a method to pile money into their funds, right?
Yeah.
That's what they do. And I think that that's step one, right? So the first step is getting to the halving. At some point around that time, I think we start seeing these ETFs getting approved. Now, if they don't get approved, what you're probably going to see is these firms like BlackRock start investing heavily in mining, right? That's another method for them to gain exposure and not lose out on the gains of the bull market. So I think one way or the other, they're going to make money in that bull market. And then you have the election coming up. That's a very important factor too, because one of the keys with the election, if you want to maintain your voter base, is to ensure that the economy is performing well. In fact, you want to ensure the economy is performing exceptionally well. So in order for them to do that at the time that it's going to matter, well, that doesn't leave too much time to start lowering rates. That's really the only way to manipulate the market in order to, start making it cheaper to borrow money again. The cost of capital is too high. You can't borrow money. If you want to buy a car right now, you're paying the highest interest rate on a car loan that you have since like the 80s, right? It's like 24% is the average. It's psychotic. Wow. And then you look at homes, you're looking at like 7.5%. So what's crazy about that is if you bought a house like in 2019, right, and you paid, I'm just going to use some blanket numbers here to give you an idea. I'm not going to do the actual math in my head, but if you paid around $500K for that house, right, you are now paying essentially double over 30 years with the additional interest, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Over 2 or 3 years, you are getting double the cost over a period of time for a home. Now, that doesn't mean people can't refinance and all that stuff, but what it does mean is that it's incredibly idiotic to buy a home right now, right? So it doesn't make much sense. The smart thing to do if you're going to buy a home is to get a short-term loan, like maybe a 10-year ARM or something like that, deal with the adjustable rates for as long as you can. And then sometime in that 10 years, you refinance and hopefully get a lower rate. But people aren't going to be happy if they can't buy homes, they can't buy cars, and if gas prices go up. So those are things that they're really going to have to tackle before the election, which also lends credibility to the fact that, okay, so why is BlackRock coming in when they are? Well, they're coming in when they are because they see the writing on the wall with what's going to happen with the halving. Their financial analysts are probably telling them that Bitcoin is likely going to see a ton of appreciation, gives them incentive to get into this market before others. On top of that, they know the Fed is going to start reversing policy on monetary policy, start cutting rates and possibly stop the rate hikes and then start cutting rates. And as all that happens, markets are going to get insanely propped up. Now, another thing that, no one's really talking about is, are they going to start printing money again? Are they going to go into quantitative easing? I think that's going to happen too. But I don't know at exactly what time, because they're technically doing it now and it's being hidden from us in the form of BTFP loans. It's really printing money. But, all this stuff comes together and it shows me that, you want to give it a stage. We're at the end of the bear market. Now, how long that end is, I'm not sure. Is it going to be 1 month? Is it going to be 3 months, 6 months? That's hard to say. But I think it's a safe bet to say that sometime within the next 6 months, the official bull market kicks off.
Yeah. Wow. Clearly, I mean, each one of those topics that you just touched on there, it would be a lot of fun, very interesting and educational to hear more about those. So I might dive some more into those, but yeah, lots of conversation metrics could definitely be brought up there. So I want to refer to your latest video that you had on your YouTube channel,
Yeah.
where I mean, I liked it because I don't know if you are extremely aware of this, but I'm a bit of a perma bull. So
Mhm.
first and foremost, you know, not financial advice, but you were looking at somewhere around quarter 1 for kind of that first real solid punch of the bull market is here.
Mhm.
And something that I liked that you shared with, which is also how I'm feeling. You brought up the TD sequential and how basically the most recent pretty harsh sell-off we had on Bitcoin over the past whatever 2 or 3 weeks. Like I was noticing it too on the relative strength on the MACD. I didn't look at too many of the others, but yeah, it's just like, where are we at in the bull market right now? I do believe that the bottom is in. Maybe we're not in the bull market sentiment feeling, but I think that the bottom is in, though it might be retested. But I mean, I let me ask you, Div, how remind me, when did you first buy cryptocurrency, and how long did it take between you first buying to kind of like digging into the trading aspect, opening the candlestick charts, looking at and learning at indicators? Like, what was a little bit of your introduction to the whole, all right, I'm into this thing now?
So I originally learned about everything from an email I got back in like 2013 or 2012, something like that. I'd gotten, like there used to be a lot of spam emails that would like come into your inboxes. And this was before we had a ton of filters like Gmail or whatever, have filters out all these things. So you would once a month or so have to go through all your emails, just delete all the spam, right? You'd have to do it manually. So as I was doing that, I saw an email that mentioned Bitcoin and it talked about the peer-to-peer, digital currency. And I was like, okay, this looks interesting. I was already somewhat into tech. Like I'd already began my career like a good 8 years prior to that. So I started just reading about it and digging into it. And as I started reading the white paper, I was like, "Oh, why doesn't this already exist?"
Mm,
If and that's what led me to reading more into monetary policy and economics. I didn't get into it yet, but that kind of planted the seed, right? So I knew about Bitcoin then, and I remember at that time Bitcoin was like super low in price compared to what it is today.
mhm.
So I wanted to buy some, and at that time the exchanges weren't as good as they are today. It wasn't as easy to buy some. So I remember, I think it was Mount Gox that I went on to. It might have been another one, but I
Classic.
remember signing on and registering an account and like getting to the point where I was going to put in a few $1,000s into Bitcoin. When I was doing all that, I kept getting denied from my bank to make the deposit.
Mm,
And I didn't care about it enough at that time to pursue that. I was like, oh, this is going to be a pain. Forget it. Right. And I was a gamer back then. So I was just, back to playing video games and stuff.
mhm.
The thing that happened though is because it planted the seed and the way my mind works, right? Like if I'm bored, I'll just research and research and research and read and read and read. So I started reading a lot more about it. And as I learned more about it, I followed it, right? I still didn't invest in it because I was like, who knows? Like, whatever. I don't really care that much. I wasn't really into investing yet. I dug into it over a couple of years. And then in 2017, that's when I saw it hit 20K. Like I saw it go up to the thousands and I was like, damn, I should have bought it. As it kept going, then I started to get more curious. I was like, this is kind of crazy, like the level of market cap it's reaching. And then I started to ask myself, I was like, if it can go from a few $100,000 to $20,000 on a blow off top, something weird is going on with this asset. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
appreciation is kind of psychotic. You don't see this in normal markets. I knew enough to realize that, right? The only thing that you see appreciate like that is something like Amazon or, Facebook, like these big market leading top industry companies, like top in their industry. They're the ones who appreciate that way. So basically what I did during that time is I just created accounts on all these exchanges and deposited money into all of them. And I was like, okay, the moment it crashes, I'm going to buy again, you know? So I had the notifications set up. 3 years later, March 2020, I get all the notifications that Bitcoin is crashing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like within 2 days, I got notifications that it went from 12K down to 3K. And as soon as it was down to like 3,500, whatever, I started buying.
Yeah.
And I think at like around 5,000, I sold a little bit. And then I just immediately started buying it back as I did more research and realized my mistake. And I just never sold after that. So I've just continued to DCA since that time. And
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of that led me to learning more about economics. So I read a lot of books on economics, and then to get to, your question about TA and how did I get into charts and indicators and all that stuff, this is what led to it. As soon as I started investing in it, I was do you play poker at all? Do you know poker?
Here and there.
So I was pot committed. You know what I mean? Like I had enough in the pot now that I was committed to learning about this.
Yeah.
That's what led to everything. So it led to reading about like Investopedia. It's like the Wikipedia for investing. I must have read like almost every topic on there. I started going through TA videos from others, learning how they're analyzing charts, getting subscriptions to all the on-chain analytics platforms, learning how to use them. That was just how I spent my free time. And a lot of the time I didn't have time to do it. So I was doing it at night. I was just staying up 3, 4 in the morning, reading and learning about all this stuff. Wife was pissed, but worked out well in the long term.
Were you heavily dependent on nicotine at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I've always vaped and done nicotine. I've gone like I have a unique relationship with nicotine where I get I get on it and off of it, right? So I like to be able to quit anything that I know is an addictive substance. So like even alcohol, I quit alcohol a lot of times just because I know this is something that you don't want to be dependent on. Same thing with nicotine.
Yeah.
I'm trying to feed that part of my personality. Like part of the reason that I'm able to just read for hours and do all this is because I have a highly addictive personality, right? So I'm trying to channel that into a lot of good things, which is why, I dove into all this and creating videos and stuff, dude. That was only because I had no one to talk to. Like during these years, early 2020 pandemic year, it was all about the election at that point. And nobody cared about anything else. So it was all about what's going on in politics and, people are scared about the pandemic and all this stuff. And I'm trying to tell my friends like, hey, you should really be focused on investing right now. Like, who cares what else is going on?
Yeah.
Like you're just letting the news blind you to the fact that this is the time to invest. So because I had no one to talk to, I started live streaming on YouTube. And that's what led to making videos.
Awesome. So you mentioned of the many things kind of in that broad crypto perspective, you mentioned the halvening coming up next year as well as the election. So I want to pick your brain. What are your thoughts on how the candidates are going to approach the conversation about Bitcoin? It's like, all right, we aren't being laughed at anymore. There are presidential candidates that are using it as part of their tactic to speaking and capturing a certain audience. So if you want to answer that about the election, and correct me if I'm wrong, I assume that you are stateside, United States side. So if you want to kind of carry that into a conversation about crypto on a national level, and if you do even want to bring it more locally or kind of the state view, you can start talking more on that. I know I feel like a conversation that will be a lot more prevalent in the future as more states, come out about this stuff. And, as this adoption kind of, all unfolds, right? So yeah, if you want to share with us, what do you think about the United States and its elections coming up, how it's going to, deal with what do you think is the mentality surrounding it in the world of policy and politics? And if you have any kind of additional thoughts talking about regulation, United States, pushing it away, bringing it in. The stage is all yours.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest roadblocks we have is the fact that our regulatory system is incredibly bogged down by unnecessary bureaucracy. So we take so long to make effective regulation that the rest of the world surpasses us by leaps and bounds while we're trying to get things through the bureaucracy. So that's a major problem. It's a major problem to innovation for a country that is essentially founded on innovation, right? So it is the reason that right now we see so much negative press and honestly just a lack of understanding and lies about the crypto industry. You don't really read a lot of the truth on mainstream media about something like Bitcoin. And you have to then understand why that is. Like, why does that happen? Well, one of the biggest things to know is that most of the news organizations that are pushing news out to the public have shareholders. And a lot of those shareholders are the same shareholders that own a lot of the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Well, if people start investing more in Bitcoin, where is a percentage of that money going to come from? It's not just going to come out of thin air. Like, we're not the Federal Reserve. We just can't print money and invest it. Only the government can do that. So if that's the case, there's a big reason for these large institutions to want to make sure that they slow down or prevent Bitcoin adoption in order to protect their own investment funds. And I think that has a lot to do with why we see negative press, negative news. It's basically to maintain a level of thought. You know, unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate thing that many people in our country are not into doing research and homework for themselves. They instead will listen to only two things. These are really the two primary sources of information. One is the push notifications that come onto their phone, and two are clips on YouTube. That's pretty much it. Those are the main sources of news for most people in the country. And if you look at those two sources for what is Bitcoin to the environment and all this stuff in a time where climate change is really taking a big policy, like a big
chunk of the conversation.
Yeah, it's like a big part of the topic, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that, it's very easy to use your news media organization now to convey Bitcoin as being bad for the environment, when in reality, it's the complete opposite of that, right? This is the one asset class today that promotes going renewable and actually makes it profitable.
Right.
So if that's the case, how's it bad for the environment? How is it becoming more and more and more renewable over time while the traditional systems are going in the opposite direction, right? Yeah. And when you start learning about the real data behind all these things, you start learning that, okay, this is manipulated. They're manipulating the thought. Now, those same organizations that control the media also have a big stake in policy because of lobbying, right? They put a lot of money into the people that are making decisions. So once again, you go back to the bureaucrats. So I think that's also why we see such poor regulation moving forward, because there are a lot of people that make a lot of money if things stay the way they are, right? So let's slow down change. And it seems like that's what the bureaucracy has done. The bureaucracy is not about let's make the country more innovative and make things better. Well, let's just keep things the way they are so that, so that everyone can keep making their money. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think our regulation will get better, but I think we need significant leadership change. And I don't just mean that politically, right? It doesn't really matter if it's a Democrat or if it's a Republican. You need a candidate that's going to go in there and actually fix the problems that are causing issues with our regulatory bodies, with our bureaucracy.
Yeah, I love what you had to say. And it's interesting what you said about how, right, the bulk of the conversation, or however we phrased it, about climate and the environment, it's like, oh, Bitcoin is bad for the environment. And we view that through nature and global warming, perhaps. But like the environment is also the human condition, like our own personal environment. And what does, kind of the capitalism and this 40-hour plus work week, what is that doing to this environment? And that, that's really part of kind of like that fundamental psychology beyond the Bitcoin white paper. But what sociological change does cryptocurrency have the power to influence? And we'll probably get into MultiversX, previously Elrond Network, in just a second here. But I know that was something that some of their marketing campaigns early on talked about was, take back your time. And so keep on going on about what you were about policy and some of those local and state views. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on that idea of, the idea that we know is not true, but Bitcoin is bad for the environment. It's like, well, it depends which environment you're looking at, and it's a conversation is the thing. And that's, for me, what I find frustration oftentimes is, people should have a conversation about something, but instead I mean, they're in the category of let's debate about it, but it's not a debate. It's just let me throw this news headline at you and get aggressive about it. So there's a whole nother conversation about the world of debate that I would just say like the world in the United States is not displaying proper debate, in the form of democracy. But yeah, any thoughts on that? And if not, just keep on chatting away. I'm loving what you're putting out there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first off, I definitely agree with you when it comes to debate. I don't think I don't think having constructive debate is really beneficial to people who do not want policy to change, right? Because that's when new ideas come forward. So it's much easier to utilize the power you have and the voice you have. So even that even includes control over mainstream media to push certain narratives, right? And that definitely happens. It's not something that is really a shock to anyone anymore. I think having distrust in every source of news you have is kind of a requirement. And this also applies to independent journalists, right? You shouldn't trust anyone.
I mean,
Instead,
I consider you an independent journalist. I mean, do you consider yourself that way as well, or how do you see yourself?
that's interesting. I never thought of myself like that. I think of myself as an aggregator, like I'm someone who reads everything. I don't care who writes it. So I'm not looking through things with biased eyes, right? I will watch news channels I don't like. I'll watch the ones that I like. I'll read news stories from every single source, whether it's an independent journalist or mainstream media. And then on top of that, I'll listen to podcasts that go over long form conversations with people that are directly involved in things. And after taking all this information into account, it gets me to a place where I can start to make decisions. The next step is to look at the raw data and information. And that's really what I enjoy doing, because that's when you can figure out, okay, are these numbers being fudged? Is something going on here that does not seem accurate? And that's kind of how I knew that Bitcoin was going to be skyrocketing. Like when I started doing live streams and stuff, and then Bitcoin was like $6,000 to $10,000, I was predicting at that time that Bitcoin would hit $30,000 to $40,000 in this bull market. So I undershot, but I was like so confident in that I just never sold. I just kept buying everything that I could.
Yeah, this is why you and me get along.
I mean, it was basically a logical decision based on what was happening in the country, right? It wasn't like, oh, Bitcoin's the best and all that stuff. I'm like, this is an asset that is going to profit from the fact that we are debasing our currency, right? So as I started seeing that, I started to make decisions. I do the same thing with news. So I don't know if I consider myself a journalist. I feel like I'd have to write more articles to do that. I've written a few where I've conveyed my thoughts, and I do that on my own personal Facebook and stuff for just my friends, for things that I don't want to really dive into too much detail on publicly. And those, like, I'll get into some more controversial conversations like that. And I always have fun doing that, because one of the things that I'm able to do is, if I converse with people about things, I'm usually able to keep a level head, even if they're attacking me, so it doesn't phase me. So sometimes you'll have a lot of trolls that'll try to like reply to your stuff or say stuff that's just literally an insult or trying to put you down. And I'm just like, bro, that's not going to work. You know, like, you can't get me with insults. It's not going to happen. Get me with data, get me with facts, get me with information. If you can't do that, get out of here. Like, it's not worth it. So once I adopted that attitude, I was like, whatever, man, I'll just do what I want. And it's part of the reason I don't take sponsors and all that stuff either, right? Like, I get emails all the time from people that are like, oh, push this token, we'll pay you this much money, or I'm from this exchange, and lead people here, we offer leverage and blah blah blah. I'm just like, no, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Like, maybe I'll get involved with some DeFi projects and stuff that I really believe in, that I think are going to do well, that I feel have potential, but I got to figure out a way to do that where it's morally and ethically viable. And I think the fact that I, as someone who just makes videos and posts on Twitter, right, can have that mentality, like, where the hell is that mentality in mainstream media? Like, what happened to that? What happened to, journalistic ethic? It's gone.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
some people have it, but I think their news organizations prevent them from actually using it. They're forced to talk about certain talking points. It's why you see so much anger from people on both sides of the political parties, because instead of just giving us unbiased information, you're getting everything in the form of, oh, if you don't support this, then you're one of the bad people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you kind of get that from both sides, and that's just not good. You know, division is what keeps your voter base, and that's not really good. It's not good for the country. So I think it's a very poor way to provide information. I think it's being leveraged to, stop people from supporting legislation. And I think it's like that whole mentality has gotten heavily into what's happening even with the SEC, because the SEC isn't acting like a regulatory body, right? They're not trying to improve regulation and, improve innovation in our country. Instead, it seems very clear that they're trying to stifle it, right? Now, why would they do that? Well, what reason would the SEC have to literally, do what we all know at this point to be just a method to delay and prolong or even possibly shutter certain industries from growing? Like, that's not in their mission statement. They're not supposed to be doing that. They're supposed to be protecting investors, right? And they're clearly doing the opposite right now, because they're forcing investors to go overseas or capital to leave the country. That's just not good. So it tells me that, that there's something fishy going on. And then I dug into Gensler. And as I started looking at Gary Gensler, I was like, this dude understood Bitcoin. He understood DeFi. Like, he talked about it in his courses. I've watched some of his lectures. He got it. He's not an idiot. He understood these things. So why did he join the SEC and suddenly change his tune? That kind of stuff happens in the government, right? And usually you have to ask yourself, is there a reason for that? What's the motive? That's what you look at. What's the motive? And it tells me that this is most likely being done by order. I don't think that he's doing this because he actually truly believes this is what needs to happen. I think he's being ordered to do it. And if I had to guess who's ordering him to do it, then I have to look at, okay, who benefits from money not going into Bitcoin? You go back to those institutional funds. And then you start getting deeper and you start seeing the real problem happening with the banking sector. Well, if people are going to trust something like Bitcoin, an ETF, or even just, raw Bitcoin on their own more than the banking system, well, you could have money start fleeing banks, especially if this asset starts appreciating way too rapidly. Yeah. If money starts fleeing banks are out of luck, because right now they're borrowing collateral from the Fed anyways, just to cover withdrawals, right? That's what BTFP loans are. So if you're in a situation like that and you're trying to protect your banking system from losing faith and trust, well, you got to keep the deposits in there. You got to keep the money in there. You don't need something new.
I remember, sorry to interrupt, but you were talking about when you first got into Bitcoin, Mt. Gox, you didn't bother with it because the banks didn't make it super easy. They declined or whatever. So I just the other week or month earlier, MultiversX had their X portal mystery box thing. So I went on there and I tried to buy some. And as per usual, it was only like 2 eagled, which is what, like 50, 75, $100. And that cost me 30 minutes at least on the phone with Bank of America trying to just get it over. So, this is what is like crazy and scary. And it's like, I see what you mean about, Gary Gensler and slowing down the process, and what vested interests are kind of, what is this order going on? But it's just like, at the same time, it's like, well, like, does it really matter? Because if everything starts to appreciate and people want to take their money out of banks, like, they won't be able to, like, so it's not, and it's kind of a non-question, and it's if anything to the viewers, it's just for a bit of an alert, like, hey, reminder, like, your money is more worthless, I would say, than like a Bitcoin balance.
Dude, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see a certain point in time where the regulation starts getting pushed through, where the big institutions and politicians and even banks are supporting Bitcoin. It's going to happen. Now, the trigger for that, in my opinion, is going to be when the banks are ready to custody it. That's when it's going to happen. So you're still going to have regulatory pushback and all that stuff, even after ETFs come out, right? Like, the next step after a Bitcoin ETF is what? Well, the next step is really getting Bitcoin to be used as some form of legal tender, right? Getting
I believe that's in the future for Bitcoin.
In the United States, I think it's going to be a very long time, and that's just because of the fact that we are the global reserve currency. But I think in general, it's gonna be the de facto legal tender for a lot of people if we continue with the monetary policy that we have today.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, what you realize when you learn about the economics of it is kind of something you touched on a little bit earlier, right? The whole reason for not putting your money in a bank and investing your money is to not maintain the amount of money, it's to maintain the purchasing power of the money. And that purchasing power of the money is being blindly stolen from people. Now, if that continues to happen, you start to realize it as you get older. Most people under 20, I would say, probably don't realize this. They've been conditioned and taught throughout school that the best thing to do is to get a job, to earn money, and put it in a bank, right? That's what I learned. That's what most people learn.
That's pretty like nonverbal too. It's kind of just like the given. I mean, speaking really only for myself, it's like that was never really told of me. It was just expected. It's the lesson of I feel like the K through 12 and into higher education. Like, yeah.
It's a form of indoctrination, because if you realize that the wealthiest people in the world do the exact opposite, right? You start to realize that the only people that you're benefiting by just working, earning money, and putting it in the bank are the banks, are the federal institutions that are using your money without you knowing they're using it. I mean, people don't even really understand what the fractional reserve banking system is. Once you realize that, you know, they only have to hold 10% of reserves and 90% of those can be just spent. Well, what happens if people want to withdraw their money, right? You have bank runs and they're not able to do it.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. Did you know that COVID-19 changed that? Like, unless they've changed it back, banks are on a 0% reserve system. Banks aren't required to have anything. So I'll provide that link in the description below, but look into that yourself, because whenever I like really realized that, I was literally telling like my friends, and it's just kind of unfortunate because again, it's like, all right, cool, like I don't really care, whatever, bank system, it's all above my pay grade. So that's just what, you know, it's so challenging, and it adds another element of hurdle to the whole industry itself, is the idea of, you know, out of all the people in the world, how many people are interested in investing their money to protect their buying, their purchasing power? And of those people, you know, like how in depth are they? Are they just retail people? Are they getting paid to allocate Wall Street money? So you just have all these different hurdles that for people like my parents I've been able to speak to, but the majority of my friends and brothers and cousins and peers, I would say, it's really sad because people really most people wait for that, oh no, like I need to do this and I need to do it now. But it's like, you know, it's all a part of like this psychology of the people who are in cryptocurrency, I would say, like a little bit of like conspiracy, a little bit of like, it's not fear driven, but it's I don't know, it is conservative driven, I would say. Just how do we conserve, you know, the time, the money that we've made to prolong ourselves, to sustain us. So I'm curious to you know, slowly kind of bring the scope, not that we aren't talking about crypto and Bitcoin altogether already, but slowly start to filter down to maybe some specific protocols that you track, that you're a fan of, that you might be invested in, if you want to share about that. But for starters, the question that I'd like to throw to you is, if you were sitting right now, if we had some US regulators with us in this conversation right now, as concise as you think you can be, how would you convince them? What are the opportunities of cryptocurrency adoption on a national level, especially in regions with varying regulatory approaches?
So what's ironic about this is that if I was in a room of regulators, I don't know if I would be trying to convince them, because I feel like the knowledge already exists. I think I'd be beating a dead horse by doing that. I think what I would be doing is trying to ask them questions as to why regulation is so slow to get through in the United States. I would be more concerned about the process, because I think when you dive into the details of Bitcoin, it's pretty clear, right? That this is, something that maintains property rights, sovereignty. It is not damaging to the environment. It is actually a much more trustable system than what we currently have in place, right? It's trustless, so you don't have to trust it like
Right,
you do
right.
with banks and everything else. So I think that if I dove into that, I could give them plenty of points as to why it should be something that is legal and why a lot of the reasons the SEC has gone after, like denied all these spot ETF approvals are just idiotic. It doesn't make sense. And I think Grayscale's lawsuit did a good job of articulating a lot of that, because they were 100% right. Like if you know about what really happened, it's like the way futures, Bitcoin futures ETFs are their underlying asset is also spot Bitcoin. It's the same as a spot Bitcoin ETF tracking the same underlying asset. So why would you approve it for one, not the other? Right? When you go into questions like that, the SEC is put in a bind. So I don't really know if I try to convince them on Bitcoin. I would more so want them to explain to me, like, what is the problem with our system? What's going on here that is preventing us from actually getting legislation through and causing us to fall behind on the global stage? Right.
Yeah.
I think that the bureaucrats in DC right now are essentially stealing tax dollars. That's what's happening. And they're doing that with their salaries, right? If they're just getting paid every year to do a job, but we're accomplishing nothing in terms of regulation, what are we paying the regulators for? Right.
Yeah,
So I look at it.
deep.
I mean, that's the way I look at it, right? If you're not
Yeah, that's a
performing
good
at your job,
consideration.
yeah. Like if I was running the government like a company, right? The people that are not achieving results, I would fire them. Right.
Yeah.
I have a team of people. I'm a manager. I manage people. I build engineering teams. And I don't hang on to people that don't put in the work and do their jobs. Like it's just simple. You don't keep them. But that doesn't happen in the government. Instead, you have bureaucrats that have been there for 20 years, right? That really aren't doing much. And being that I've also worked in the government sector, I've seen this firsthand. People that are just in jobs for a long period of time that are really not accomplishing anything, but are kind of grandfathered into those roles. Like they're just going to continue receiving that money. And when you start seeing that, you start realizing this is a deeper problem than just the regulators. I think it applies everywhere. Fixing it is what I'd be interested in talking to them about.
Yeah, those are really great points. And it reminds me of what we were discussing earlier, a point that you brought up about the an unnecessary bureaucracy. And I view that I'm right there with you. And I'm not sure. I mean, it's like the idea of the legislation system, how it goes through the checks and balances, and the idea of, we're a democracy. I mean, I don't think there's really any perfect form of policy per se, but it's such an interesting thing to note. It's like, in order to bring bills into laws, obviously they first have to become a bill. So just like the entire process is so drawn out, it's outdated, it's inefficient. The population, as well as if you're hoping to see more male and female balance in those sectors. I mean, the details don't matter. It's like there's a sense that change needs to happen. There's a very long time frame of those things coming into fruition, but we're a democracy. So it's like, I mean, truth is, it's like, it's almost like all this, it's like what happens in the past, what's happened in the past, it's pushed along. It's like democracy, like people take to the streets. And it's like, obviously we've seen some very just poor examples of what democracy is. But it's like, all right, in my head, we the people must almost like, whether it be explicitly or ideologically, take to the streets and ask these questions that you are, and question, like, you are stealing money, you're just chilling there, not accomplish anything, just bleeding money out of the system. That's not okay. That's our tax money. This is our economy. And it's like, well, what the hell how is this really gonna play out? Because what I just said was that, the majority of people, they're just not interested in, like, all right, like, Bitcoin, I don't care. I mean, like, I work my job, I have my 401k, the market's doing okay. So like, that's the thing that's scary. It's like, in order for some of these, actual bills and things and regulatory actions to come into play, it's like, which is going to come first? And it's like all I don't know. I mean, is there anything that you want to respond on that?
I would just say that I think we basically need, in order to tackle this problem, we need leadership to go in there with a directive of actually changing things, that they want to go in there to make change. And there are some candidates I see that want to do that. Now, granted, I never make hasty decisions. There are people that I support in the next election, but I'm also going to be listening to every word they say between now and then, right? To make my decision and see how things go. So you never know. The people I support politically may change in the next 6 months, depending on how they perform, what they do, and whether someone else comes along who seems like they're going to tackle the problems better. So I think that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to executive leadership getting in there and cleaning house. It needs to happen. It's not happened for a long period of time. And it's getting to the point now where, you know, so if you keep putting, if you have a can of oil in your garage and you leave that can of oil there for 2 decades and you keep putting it into your car and then recycling the same oil, right? You're not buying a new can. You're just draining the oil and then you're putting it right back in. It's going to turn into sludge. It's going to move slow and your car is going to shut down and stop working.
Yeah.
That's what's happening in the government.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. We just have the same people in there. They're slowing down over time. They're not improving efficiency. So we'll see. I mean, I'm hopeful that things can change because I think, like you said, we the people want it to change. And that is starting to become more of a prevalent thought and idea, right? It's starting to get to the point where people are realizing that they need to start investing. They need to stop believing the traditional story of just keep things in banks and all that. The information's starting to flow out there. And I think a lot of it's going to have to do with the people like us that are in the know teaching other people these things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. People aren't always going to listen to you, but results will speak for themselves. So all my friends that I was trying to explain these things to back in 2020 to get them to start investing, I was like, look, it doesn't even matter where you invest. Invest in an index fund, like put your money somewhere. Don't keep it in the bank because you're going to lose value in the bank. You're going to gain a ton of value if you invest it somewhere else. They didn't listen to me until things started going up 100%. Right. Mm-hmm. So then suddenly what I was saying held a little bit more weight. Right.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to do. You just throw the ideas out there. Don't force them to listen. Right. Just make sure they hear you. As long as they hear you, as information starts coming out, they're going to be like, oh, wow, Stephen was right. You know, that's what drives change, because instead of believing what you always hear, you start to believe the people that are educated. Part of the reason why I still make videos. I mean, I'll tell you this, dude, what I do on YouTube and Twitter makes me zero, literally zero money. Right. I don't gain anything from it. It's a time sink, actually. That's really all it is, right? The money, the whatever little money that comes from YouTube and from my subscribers on Twitter goes right back into my Adobe Premiere subscription, like our Creative Cloud subscription, my Epidemic Sound subscription, like all these things that I use just to support my content are paid for by those few things. And, you know, a lot of the things I've done in the past where I've given things away or whatever, that's just come out of my own pocket. So it's not like I'm doing this for money. Right. I'm doing this because it's important to share the ideas. Right. It's going to influence people to at least see things clearly on their own. Whoever is lucky enough to find the videos and get into this space.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Kind of along those ideas of, you know, seek and you shall find. But then I just love phrases like that because there's always one to contradict it. Like you can lead a horse to water, but can't force it to drink. Sure. So, yeah, dude, those are really great points, really interesting perspectives that, especially when it comes to politics, you know, we could get carried away just chatting on and on. But I do want to start to bring more of the Bitcoin and altcoin conversation into focus here. And you've already mentioned a little bit about, you know, just in conversation, and obviously for people who are familiar with you, Div, people are well aware of your stances on some of these things. So feel free, I can direct a question at you if you'd like. But I was just going to kind of ask for, you know, for myself, for the audience, you know, what kind of things are you looking at? You mentioned in your last video that DeFi being a higher risk asset class, we'll call it. Maybe not diving too head over heels into there, but you seem to have a few tokens that you seem to cover regularly. So yeah, I mean, and I don't know really how in depth you're aware of, you know, the computer science aspect and everything, but yeah, give us kind of your personal outlook on cryptocurrencies, the kind of the architecture and the protocol level of, you know, from Bitcoin to Ethereum, and I know ADA and MultiversX Eagled, you know, brings us here together. But yeah, where are you at these days? What do you think in the scope of interoperability and a multi-chain Web3 future? Yeah, I want to pick your brain on where you think some of these different gears, we'll call them, will come into play, shifting away from, you know, the United States being a bunch of slow asses and not getting on their game. Let's bring it back into the world of Web3 where things are moving and there's a lot of positive energy and attention.
Sure. So I'll start this off by saying that my entire mentality towards Bitcoin and DeFi, it starts off with how I look at industries in general. So I think with every disruptive industry, what you end up having is you have a few market leaders in perpetuity. So if we look at online shopping, right, it's Amazon, right? There's a few competitors that are foreign, but in most cases, Amazon is the go-to. It's the market leader. You go to social media, it started off as MySpace. MySpace got beaten by Facebook. Facebook is still the market leader. They now own WhatsApp. They now own Instagram, right? So Meta, the parent company, because of Facebook, they're the market leader. Now you'll continue to see this pattern in almost every industry. I think the same thing is going to apply for digital assets. I don't think we're suddenly going to rewrite history. I think patterns are going to occur in the same way, because once liquidity goes to a certain place and trust is built, adoption follows. So in that scenario, I think that Bitcoin is the market leader in the same way that Facebook and Amazon are market leaders in their respective fields. So when I look at it through that lens, and then I see that Bitcoin doesn't rely on a team of people or anything like that, it gives me more faith to hold this as a commodity, as an asset that I'm going to keep long-term to maintain my purchasing power. So in reality, turns into a reserve. That's how I look at it. It is my global reserve currency that I use for my personal finances. Then I look at DeFi, and what I see here now is a tech startup industry. That's basically what it is. It's a tech startup industry that is being built on top of this, you know, protocol and technology created and really shown to the public by Bitcoin. So that leads Buterin to make Ethereum, right? Ethereum brings in smart contracts. Now all these other blockchain companies see, okay, well, there's opportunity here for us to do what Ethereum did, but we can do it better. So now you have a war between startups. That's how I look at it. And when I look at it in these ways, and I compare those startups to the internet startups in like 1999, well, historically, that tells me a few things. Most of them are going to be dead, right? The majority of them are not going to survive the test of time because of network effect and adoption. Once the leaders start adopting the users, the other users will go there because the platforms are useless without the users, right? That's really the key. So this is why I don't support a lot of projects, right? It's the reason why I don't get into random tokens. I don't allow people to give me money so that I promote their tokens, because I look at it like, well, I could just be promoting something to someone that will lose them everything, right? That's what happened in the tech startup world. So I'm not going to do that. Like, I have morals and ethics. I'm not going to let that happen. So what did I focus on? How did I pick the projects that I'm interested in DeFi? Well, one, Ethereum, just because of the simple fact that it's the market leader in the DeFi space, right? So Bitcoin really has no competitor in its use case as a decentralized global reserve currency. Like, for that specific purpose, there is no competition, right? Then you go to Ethereum and you see this entire other application layer being built on top of blockchains. And you're like, okay, this is now something where people can compete, right? And when I start looking at the competition, the only way to differentiate between them is with the technology, right? Being someone who's an engineer and that's a technologist, I understand deeply the concepts of computer science and technology and infrastructure architectures. Like, I've built them. So I get them. And when I read the papers and I start learning about the back end technology, that's what sells me on. So one of the reasons I found Cardano and I found MultiversX or Elrond is because of, well, with Cardano, it was a little bit less of their architecture and a little bit more of their vision of what they were actually looking to build.
Mm.
I think the architecture is good too, but I don't know if it has the potential to take off in comparison with other assets unless it achieves the network effect, right? I think that's really the key. I also gauge these things based on what I actually enjoy using, right? When I, because I've tested out a lot of different DeFi platforms, and overall, MultiversX has always been the one that I've found has the most appealing UI and apps and all that kind of stuff. So as a user, I'm looking at it going, okay, what do I enjoy? Like if there's going to be an adoption phase in a year or 2 years or whenever it is, like what are the users going to like? And that's when I started getting really interested in the future of MultiversX. But what got me into Elrond originally was the white paper. When I was reading about their infrastructure and how they're building the blockchain and basically building the blockchain to support sharding. And as they were doing that, I was like, well, you know what? This was what would solve the gas fee problem with Ethereum, right? If Ethereum was able to achieve this. I think Ethereum's even kind of acknowledged that in the past. And then on top of it, they've tried to do sharding, right? They're trying to achieve the same thing. So it was the technology that led me there. What kept me there was the progress I saw from the builders and the team. And as of right now, I've yet to come across a competitor that I think has met those standards, right? So it leads me to believe that there's potential for adoption. So because I believe in that potential for adoption and I've built a trust in the people that control the blockchain, it's led me to support the platform. So I think it's a very educated type of decision, but I also tell people this every time I talk about MultiversX, Elrond, Ethereum, Cardano, a couple of other ones that I've followed here and there, like Polkadot, Matic, like these specific ones. When I talk about DeFi, I always make it a point to tell them, like, look, this is super risky. You're investing in startups right now, right? If you were in 1999 and you were putting all your money into startups, you go into those with the expectation of losing the money. That's the wise way to do it, right? You don't go in with the expectation of your money growing 10x or 100x, because that's an unrealistic expectation. There are too many variables for you to make that expectation, right? You can be passionate about it. That's one thing, like that's perfectly fine. But when you're going with numbers and money, like your passion and probability, they don't go together, right? Those are two completely different things. Like emotionally, you can have a connection to something. You can see, oh, this is why I want adoption. This is why it's good. Like these are all the benefits. That doesn't translate to financial statistics, right? When you look at statistics, what you want to do is you want to invest in things that you know are going to protect the value of your money, that are going to grow the value of your money. And then you want a percentage of it, like a smaller percentage that you're okay with losing, that has the potential to go 100x, right? That's the right way to do it. That's why I talk about risk management, right? There are way too many people in these industries, dude, that have lost everything for the same reasons, just going all in on a single protocol without realizing the broader picture of it. Like you got to step outside the box, zoom out and look, and you see all these different companies. And then you see a certain group of human beings that has to use them, right? The human beings are going to flood to where other human beings are. So that's why I've always said adoption and getting users is going to be key. It's why I really like what the MultiversX team is doing with XDay and all that kind of stuff. They're bringing in people from different areas and getting them to start attaching to the community, like build the community. That's how you build your user base, especially before a bull market, right? Users are going to be much more likely to go into a platform and start giving it a chance if it has a good user base who's willing to teach them, that's going to not attack them, that's going to do fun things together.
Yeah.
That's how you build a community. And that's how you eventually build a group of people that start using this community for financial transactions, right? It's not going to happen any other way.
Yeah, I love that answer. And what you said about just how, I mean, just what you just shared in those past few minutes there, it just parallels perfectly with what I was saying at the very beginning. Your the advice that you give, just the vision that you have. I could have used. I wish I could have heard what you just said whenever I was first investing in crypto, because even though I was heavily invested and I was able to capture a solid size of the last bull market, I have lost friends over, hey, dude, like, check this out, like, invest in cryptocurrency. And it's like, I always say the stereotypical don't invest more than you can afford to lose, but I just feel like it was invaluable for you to state that these are startups, and even how you you began by saying that this is a new form of kind of tech startup industry, and like that is exactly what it is.
Mhm.
And it's like I've seen it, but like hearing you say that is what it really kind of like it kind of clicked for me. And it's like, yes, like it doesn't matter if in this XY chat of time and price, if there's a huge blow off top, it's like it doesn't matter, it's still a tech startup, it's still going to go down and reprice to that tech startup level. And you hear a lot of shilling about how market caps and potential for growth, and it's like, well, okay, well, we just have to be real that that is nothing but speculation. And that's definitely an area that we all know is very indicative of where we're at in the crypto cycle. Like right now, it's like I mean, maybe if somebody is trading with leverage, or maybe they just found a random gem that pumps, like nobody, I don't feel like, is really experiencing euphoria and this sense of, I need to tell everybody about this cool thing. But I do believe, and I'm curious to, I have a question to phrase at you,
Yeah.
because the emphasis of this whole conversation is drawing out what you have to share, what the guest has to share with us. But I will force us more into a multiverse X corner here in just a moment here before we kind of close out. um but kind of lost my train of thought there, when I was talking about just the idea of investing and the idea of euphoria and blow off tops. But yeah, absolutely, I want to emphasize again what you said about the architecture versus the vision, how you look at the architecture of some of these protocols. And yeah, I'll use that to kind of shift the conversation, if you'd like to take it to multiverse X. Because yeah, the vision, like, yeah, I found the early white papers and about Elrond Network in the early days, about 2019 is when I first discovered. And it was like, all right, like I like what I'm seeing here, I feel like it agrees with the idea of Bitcoin. And then whenever I went on Twitter and I found Benjamin and the team, and they're communicative, and they feel right there. Obviously there's a conversation to be had about the pros and cons of making yourself too available to an audience. But 100%, man, like the vision is really what it comes down to. And then again, another point that you made that nailed it was what you said. And this is why I choose Multiverse X, is that I enjoy using it. And part of that enjoyment comes out of, well, I know that it's an efficient blockchain, and I know that it's secure. I know the classic conversation that we're trying to move on from is the idea of excessive fees, of just traffic per se on the blockchain, but then just using a product. And I know if Benjamin was here sitting with us, I mean, he would be talking up X Portal, the phone application. But to be honest, man, like I feel like I use the Chrome DeFi extension, and just all the different kind of dApps that I do use. It's just like, you don't, for me, I don't question anything. Like it's all just fun to use, straightforward. And again, it relies on that idea of, well, I know that it's secure, and it's a trustless system. So yeah, if you have any thoughts, otherwise I can just kind of pick your brain and pose a question just about, as much as I want you to say Multiverse X, because I feel like that's what I'm most bullish on. But for you personally, are you a multi-chain user? I mean, in the future, like, do you think that, you know, maybe the appreciation of assets may guide or inform what protocols you're using? But yeah, I am curious on your thoughts to really kind of expound on the multiverse to the power of X, previously Elrond Network. You already touched on X Day and how you appreciate what they're doing with bringing lots of different people into the same room, opening conversations. You said the word infrastructure, and MultiversX, led by Benjamin, you know, he's been very transparent, as we've seen, especially the X Day speakers come out. They're focused on, you know, they seem to be focused on getting important decision makers into the conversation. So I threw a lot at you. So yeah, I can just kind of let you run as I know you'll be able to work with.
Sure.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
I'll start with one point you made about like telling friends and family and stuff to invest and, you know, buy this or buy that. So I've learned one thing as I've been, because I've done the same thing, right? But I've always approached it in a way that I try to tell other people you should approach it this way too. The way to really do it is just to get them off zero. That's it. And have them do it with an amount that they are okay with losing. And like the way that I did it for my brother, as an example, I was just like, dude, how much would you, if you went out for a weekend just to hang out with your friends and go to some restaurants and go out, how much do you think you'd be willing to spend? And he was like, I don't know, like $200. And I was like, okay, take $200, invest it in, you know, put $100 in crypto, in Bitcoin, put $100 in Ethereum, you know, just do that and just start watching it. Because what happens is when you get them off zero, they have an interest, right? They're not pot committed, but they're committed to some degree. They'll at least start learning. They'll have a reason to learn. So that's what I've done. And if I've wanted people to learn more about Elrond in the past, I would just send them an eagle, right? I would just send them half an eagle or one eagle or whatever. And I'd be like, all right, just hold it, learn about it. If you don't want it, or if you think it's worthless, just send it back to me, right? Yeah. I received some of them back. Some of them I didn't, right? And part of that's the way that I look at it. I'm just like, I'm not telling you to go in and invest anything unless you're willing to lose it all. Like that's pretty much it. That's the way to go about it. And in the long term, it works out because all you're doing is enlightening them a little bit into this. So now diving a little bit more into the other things you talked about and going into MultiversX. So pretty much I think that all of DeFi is experiencing just a lack of users and liquidity. That's the problem. And the ones that are going to make it are going to be the ones that put in the prerequisites needed to capture those two things. That's really what it's going to be. Like, I think another thing that would really help the team is doing long form podcasts like this, you know, like stuff like this. And even if it's with like people in the community, or even if they're going on like much larger podcasts with some of the like larger crypto YouTubers and stuff, and just talking openly. I think that has now become something that appeals to people. So imagine this. Imagine you're a brand new user into DeFi as the markets start booming and you're trying to figure out what assets to invest in. You start looking them up. Well, if you start finding that, well, this one project has key team members that are doing all these long form podcasts and just discussing their project and how things work internally and where money's going, all that kind of stuff, it's going to build a lot of trust. Sorry. So I think that kind of stuff is really important. Overall, I try to look at it right now. So going to your next question, you had asked me about how I use DeFi and do I do things cross-chain. So as of right now, I would consider myself a DeFi investor, not a DeFi user. And the reason for that is over the last 6 to 12 months, I just haven't had a lot of use for it, right? I'm not really buying NFTs and stuff anymore. The markets are super low. So there may be times that I'm going and checking prices on certain ones that I think will do good in the next boom cycle of that specific sector. And the same thing applies to, you know, things like staking, but I don't really have to touch those much. You know, like I have, I think 50% or so of my eGold in staking, like in general, like traditional validator staking. And then the other 50% I keep liquid, right? I keep a certain percentage of it liquid. And in like
Is that
the
just sitting in your wallet?
yeah, totally, man.
Huh. I mean, so
Absolutely.
just to interrupt, I mean, how come you aren't at least maybe popping that into one of the liquidity pools on X exchange like Eagle USD or anything to just earn a little bit of passive income off of that valuable liquidity?
One thing I've learned is that passive income is a very tricky concept when you start seeing how things play out in DeFi. As an example, if if you are someone who wanted to earn passive income on your Bitcoin and you put it into one of these platforms that gives you interest on your Bitcoin, well, you're running a significant risk of losing all the Bitcoin, right? Now, I'm not saying that that same risk exists on the MultiversX platform, but I'm not saying that it doesn't, right?
For sure.
We don't know what type of vulnerabilities exist and what could happen. So
Mhm.
what am I doing? Well, I'm making sure that I have a small percentage that is I don't personally, I don't like putting anything in liquidity pools just because of impermanent loss, right? It's something that it's a very difficult thing to predict and calculate. And
Yeah.
because of that, I don't like the risk factor of it. So if I don't like the risk of something, I'm the first person to tell you, not for me, not something that I'm willing to do. I did it before, and that's how I really learned about impermanent loss. And I learned ways to protect against it. But then I also realized that it's just not worth the risk. Like I'm not gaining enough out of it to risk losing the asset I don't want to lose,
Yeah.
right? The underlying asset, eGold, is the one that I don't want to risk. I'm okay with risking my MEX or whatever, like whatever else there is, any other token, I don't care. I'm okay with risking it. I don't want to risk my Bitcoin. I don't want to risk my eGold. I don't want to risk my Ethereum. Like these are single assets that I think are more important because they give you a stake of the blockchain, right? They're essentially ownership rights in the blockchain.
Yeah.
So because of that, I don't put it there. So essentially, the reason I have a bunch of eGold just sitting liquid is so that I can take advantage of markets whenever they come, and I'm not issued any other risk than just price performance. That's a risk I'm willing to accept, right? But I don't want to accept anymore. I don't want to put it all in traditional staking because of the delay period for withdrawing it. So I can't put it all there, right?
And then I mean, for MEX, it's like fully charge it for 4 years. It's like if 10 days is too much of a hump, then I can only assume that 4 years is just so far out of the question.
Too far out of the question. I wouldn't invest that. You know what I'd invest in for that long a period of time? Myself, right? My education. I would be buying things for my family. I can't do that. I can't put that risk there because it's too long of a time frame in an industry that right now I look at as being a startup industry. Totally. So, and it could be the best decision. You never know. That investment could end up 100xing for you. I can't say that it won't, but I just can't take the risk, right? So for me, it's very much level-headed with risk and pointed to a direction of what can I actually take advantage of? So why don't I just stake? Why am I giving up the staking rewards, like the passive income, right? That's one thing I hear a lot. People question me on that all the time. Well, the main reason is let's say we hit a top of this bull market, right? The bull market goes up really high. There's some tremendous news, some policy changes, something like eGold shoots up. It goes up to like $1,000. Well, when it hits a top like that, I'm going to sell a bunch of it. And I'm going to have a bunch of it to sell because it's liquid. And in that moment, while people are waiting for things to come out of staking, right? In that moment, I will make up everything that I lost in passive income because I have the ability to sell at the top of the market.
Yeah.
Right. So
I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's the reason I do it, because I believe in the underlying asset. I don't want to risk the underlying asset. But I also don't want to not make any interest. So I use traditional staking because that's the safer method. Now, once adoption starts to rise and we see more users coming in, the strategy changes, right? But for right now, I'm at the low risk strategy. I'm not here to fund someone else's business, right? They need to do what they need to do to build the platform and compete with other competitors. That's their job as the people who run, the blockchain. That's the job of the team. That's why they're there. That's why they have all the funds that they have so that they can build, right? Unless I become a builder myself at some point and I have the time, I don't really have that stake in it. I'm looking at it as an outside observer, as an investor. The moment an investment is bad, I'm going to be public about it and talk about why I don't believe in it. But as long as it still stays good, which is what I'm looking at now, well, then I'm going to stay in, but I'm going to go in with that risk mindset.
Totally. Yeah. That's just more words of wisdom from our guest here, everybody. So yeah, what do you have to say about X Day? I mean, we saw last year the Elrond Network has, it's still there. It'll always be in our hearts, but now we've got Multiverse to the power of X, abbreviated MultiversX. So kind of shortly take us back in time to last November. I mean, depending on how, in tune with everything you were, how did you process through the rebrand? And as over these past, I guess we're in quarter 3 now, after, the past, yeah, we'll just say year to date, how is the team doing with its vision? Are they carrying your hopes? Has anything wavered? I mean, a lot of what you're saying is it's informing. It's almost like you've already given the answer, but I'm curious, just explicitly, what are your thoughts on Multiverse X, Benjamin, Lucian's, the two of them, and what they're doing with X Day? Like, and if you want to get into any sort of speculation towards the end of that. But yeah, I mean, are you still bullish on Multiverse X?
As of now, yeah, I am. I am still bullish. I'm bullish on the potential. That's what I'm bullish on, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what anyone should be bullish on. When I see people post a lot of things all the time about how they're sure about how things are going to perform, and I'm just like, look, the only thing that I'm fairly sure about is Bitcoin, right? And even that, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure enough that I trust it more than putting my money in a bank,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. When I look at any other assets, so specifically now Multiverse X, we got to go back to that lens, right? Like put yourself in the same frame of mind as me, looking at this as a startup with plenty of other startups for competition, right? That's the lens I look through. So when I look at it through that lens, I now see how they have performed and how they built and how they dealt with the market during the bull market. I was impressed with that, right? I thought they did a good job of communication, transparency, and of actually achieving milestones that they had set for themselves. The development side of it was going very well. I was seeing progress as things were being built. When there was a major issue with the exchange and a launch of a token, they went above and beyond to not only recover funds, but to instill a level of trust within the community that they did not have to do, right? But I like the fact that they did that. So when I get to Benjamin and Lucian, I look at these guys and I hear what they say. I listen to all their town halls. I look at their tweets. I don't interact much because I'm more of a listener, right? I talk about the things that I think are relevant for what I want to share publicly, but I do listen to everything, right? That's how I make the decisions I make. And I think they're both smart guys. I think they're intelligent. And I think that they're leading their team in a direction where they can best capture market share. That's really what I think they're doing. I think they're trying to achieve milestones that are going to be necessary to put them in a position to capture market share when it starts coming in, right? And I think that's the right way to do it for anyone in this space, right? Totally. Especially at a time when, nobody's really making money. Even a lot of builders are just putting in their own money now to do things. A lot of people are taking loans and borrowing money. So when you're doing that and you're building into a new industry, well, you're now part of that tech startup. That's what you're doing. If you're a builder putting in your own money, building on a specific ecosystem, well, you're part of the startup now. You've joined them. Right.
Kind of funny you frame it like that because on my LinkedIn profile, I mean, because technically a DeFi liquidity pool is a smart contract. It's like, well, by contract, like, and then it's returning me money. It's like on my LinkedIn when I was just like content writing for myself, but, advocating for Multiverse X, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I kind of view it like I'm working, like I'm part of the startup, just as you just said.
Yeah. You kind of are, right? For anyone who is investing and staking and all that, they are part of the startup, right? They might not be the core team of developers that have a certain level of funding and control over the way that things on the blockchain are improved over time. They may not have control on all that, but they at least have the voice with those teams, which is important. And they have the ability to make a decision to invest their money and time and effort into something that they believe that it's going to do well. So when you see more people doing that, that is very indicative of something that is going to be a success. I see enough people doing that with MultiversX. And honestly, like, one of the things that's interesting about eGold in general is that when it's doing well, you only hear positives about it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like from mainstream people that are the much larger people that have voices in this space, in crypto Twitter in general. But when it's down with the rest of the market, you really don't hear anything bad, right? Now, there's a reason for that. That's because there's competent people in charge of it. There's competent builders that have seen this. And over time, a group has formed to build this community where trust and integrity is valued. That's important, super important to bring more people in. So I do think, I do consider myself bullish on it, but I'm not disregarding the risk. And because of that, relatively speaking, in my portfolio, my allocation to DeFi is quite low. And now my accumulation is also quite low. And, you know, it's kind of funny because even though I'm accumulating lower amounts, I'm able to accumulate more in quantity than I was before because it's cheaper, right? So in reality, I'm really fine with that. I'm good with not putting in the same amount of money because for the lower amount of money, I'm getting more of the asset. So in reality, I'm still accumulating what I always accumulated. I'm just doing it not in terms of USD value. I'm just doing it in terms of the number of eGold. So, you know, I tell people that and they start looking at it differently, right? You don't have to look at it as, oh, I have to put in all my money here. Set the targets as the amount of eGold you'd like to have by a certain amount of time.
Which is what X Portal has you said. They don't say what dollar amount, I don't believe. They say how many eGold would you like to accumulate? You know, I turned it up to the maximum. I mean, knowing far well I don't have any sort of, but it's like, hey, you know, manifestation, right?
Right. Yeah, man. And that's really what it takes. You know, it takes that mentality, though, in a lot of different sectors. So one of the things that I think people need to do more of so there's a lot of people that have become siloed in DeFi, right? And what I mean by that is they find a community and a project that they like, and they don't look elsewhere at all. You can't treat this industry like that.
Well,
right?
You might be describing me, and that it's okay. I acknowledge that, but please continue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also mean like what you're looking at and not what you're speaking about. You know what I mean? Because even if you post a lot about like MultiversX, that doesn't necessarily mean that Steven isn't doing research on everything else, right? It just means that you're posting about one specific thing where you're like concentrating your knowledge and information, right? Which is perfectly fine. But what people need to do in the background is look at everything else, right? Look at how other teams are developing things. What features do they have in mind? Where do they seem to be going in the next year, right? And when you do that, you start to become more bullish on MultiversX, right? When you look at what they're doing with XDay, when you look at the partners they're putting together, the milestones they look to be wanting to reach, you look at things like Guardian and X Money, like you look at all of these different things they're building to solve different use cases. And now one of the things I liked about the town hall is when Benjamin he made a point in a certain portion of that, you know, conversation that he was not conversation, but what he was telling us was that they really want to look into interoperability. That's going to be a big part of the next phase, to be able to work with other chains and to work with data aggregators, things like that. I think that's going to be super important. That's something that I think has been missing for a while, right? That needs to be something that takes the forefront, because then your community changes, right? You're not isolated to this ecosystem. Now, anyone on another ecosystem can join in. That's really going to be important. And I also like the fact that he's making it a point for their team to look into speaking with people in government and people in different companies. Like, these are the kind of things you need to do. And not everyone is doing that. You have a lot of other crypto projects that when you start diving into them, like I said, right, you don't want to focus your knowledge on one place. Dive into them just like you do with MultiversX, learn about them, and then your case becomes even stronger for the ones that are doing it right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I start to see that more and more. I just don't vocalize it a lot, because the problem is when I talk about these kind of things on Twitter or even on my YouTube channel, those things can very easily be misconstrued in a short form to be promoting something versus, you know, really taking into context or taking into like, what is it? lost my word, taking into your consideration the context of what I'm saying, right? What I'm doing here is I'm not pushing a single project. I'm saying, looking at this project in comparison to others and doing the same amount of research equally against the others, I see this one as performing better in terms of how they are getting those prereqs in to achieve adoption and growth, right? As an investor, that's what I want to see, right? So I see it being done well here. I'm not really finding a ton of other competitors that are achieving the same thing. So that's why I'm bullish on it, which is a lot different than a lot of other people. Like, a lot of other people aren't bullish on it for the same reasons. Now, when I go to X Day specifically, I'm always excited for that. Last year was interesting. I tried to listen into whatever I could. I'll be doing the same thing this year. Sometimes it's just about expanding your knowledge. So I've even listened to conferences from other blockchains that I don't have any any vested interest in or investment in, but I listen to it because it gets you thinking. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to do too with this one. Like, I saw the other day that one of the co-founders of Druid's going to be on there. And for people who don't know about it, Druid's a super interesting platform, especially if you work in engineering and automation. It essentially creates like AI powered chatbots. That's pretty much what it is.
Cool.
But the way that you do the modeling and stuff in the back end to create those, and how you can integrate it with like things like robotic process automation and other type of tools, super interesting. So it's a platform I really like. When I saw she was going to be on there, I was like, okay, definitely listening to this one. And I'll see more about what they have on the agenda and probably listen into as much of it as I can.
Yeah. I'm very excited for X Day this time of year, or rather this time around. As we know, it's last year's was really just focused big time on, yes, we're rebranding, and obviously they introduced a lot of new ideas. So I don't know, like I think everybody for the most part is on edge, and I use that term loosely just because there's this idea that's been brewing within me for a while now, and it's partly good, it's partly bad, and it has to do with the conversation about marketing and about announcements and rollouts of products. Because dating back to a year ago, when we were anticipating the coming first X Day, we all were, also very much anticipating, an upgraded model for the MEX token, especially just in the wake of MyRDEX launching, the bear market letting us know that it's a bear market. Obviously, those, dating back a year ago is a very different mentality, I would say. My thought is that, similar to how Samsung has their one major like cell phone event of the year to showcase their new models for the year, Apple does the same thing. It very much seems like MultiversX is taking the same approach, is perhaps, all right, X Day is kind of the moment, and the next year will be an unraveling of some of these ideas. But I mean, let's be real, the last X Day, they rolled out some dates, they gave us timelines, and it's an ongoing thing for MultiversX. We could definitely go on the side of cons versus pros of sticking to your dates, making dates. But I mean, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, like I said, because now we're still looking forward to this next X Day. What's it going to bring? Yeah, and we still have two major products as announced last year, such as X Fabric and the X Worlds Metaverse. And there's also what you're talking about with this AI new partner, and that got me thinking too about the buzz that has been the discussion and the partnerships MultiversX with Tencent Cloud, the tech behemoth for Asia, and So anything to respond to that? Any sort of speculation? What the heck do you think could X Day 2023 be revealing for us? Anything big? Do you think it's going to be underwhelming?
I don't know. I'm going into it with any expectations, man. Like, I went into this the same way as last time. For me, it's information gathering. That's all it is, right? At the end of the day, there's one thing that we all know for sure. What X Day is, what, towards the end of this month?
October 20th.
October 20th. So towards the end of next month.
Yeah.
So basically, what really matters is, where do you see markets at the time of early October? or I'm sorry, early November,
Yeah.
right? Where do you see markets? Well, I don't think that we're going to see the transition into the full bull market just yet by then, which means that if people are expecting X day to have some major price effect, I don't know if that's going to happen, right? I think it's much more likely that X day could have a delayed effect. Something like this that is available online is going to be viewed by a lot of people when the bull market actually begins, right? They will go back and look at this to learn about what happened with this project back in November of 2023, and now it's April or May of 2024. What have they achieved since then?
Yeah.
Right. That's really going to be what's going to help people adopt the asset over time, because it's going to be something where you can really get familiar with everyone on the project. So I'm going to be looking at it just as someone going in to learn something. I want to learn, what are they doing? What are they focused on? Did you lose audio or something?
No, I raised my hand and it flipped the screens around. Does it look the same for you?
Yeah, everything's the same for me.
That was weird. Please continue. But
Okay.
I mean, now that I'm so rudely interrupted. So
Yeah, go ahead.
in the last town hall, Benjamin, so I love what you're saying, and I agree with the idea of the retrospective appreciation, acknowledging, oh my goodness, yes, they talked about it, but now it's coming into fruition. But so I'm a musician, and there's a open mic idea that's like, well, if nobody goes to an open mic, like the energy is going to be dead. Like it takes every single person showing up and bringing that energy. So please continue that what you were sharing. But what about the idea of multiverse X like brings the bull market? Do you think that that is any sort of a possibility? Because Benjamin, I don't know if he's talking about X portal because he loves that. We love that. But Benjamin specified without saying X portal in the last town hall the power of one application that people will use, acknowledge as being different, and can perhaps bring about a mass adoption event. So please continue with your thoughts. But I mean, and it's dangerous on Benjamin's side. It reminds me of the whole MEX is the first class citizenship discussion of, oh man, like Benjamin knows something. There's some NDAs going on, and there is one app, and it's gonna happen. But it's like, well, Benjamin doesn't have a crystal ball to tell the future. Nobody does. But that's the idea. That's the hopium piece for me. It's just like, oh, like, I don't know. I like what MultiversX is doing. I like their vision. I like their architecture. So it checks out, And there's some other Twitter users that call it, I can't remember, but just the idea of like, yeah, MultiversX being the one, I feel like that's kind of a topic that comes and goes in the bull cycles, but that's why I invested in Elrond, in ERD, in eGold, in MEX, in these different areas, because whether or not it will be the one, I think that it is irrefutable that the what's being built is well positioned. So I'm very on the speculative bull side of things. So I very much appreciate your balancing to the scale.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said in terms of, agreeing that they're positioning themselves properly, right? I definitely agree with that too. Now, I do think that there are probably more steps that can be taken to properly position themselves. And I think a lot of that would have to do with increasing the visual media presence, right? So, for example, on Twitter, you can post videos, right? If the team starts posting weekly videos with their updates, maybe something that's 5 minutes long, that's going over an email or going over a Twitter thread, something like that is going to reach a lot more people than a thread with all the updates.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So things like that, I think, can be done prior to the next phase of adoption coming in. I like Benjamin's vision to say that one application can have this type of impact on the market. He is not wrong about that, but that should not be misconstrued for hopium, right? It is simply a fact. If you deliver a product that is going to be providing a valuable service to people, people will use it, right? Especially if it's at low cost, right? So that's just a simple concept that he's taken and essentially rephrased it to how he's applying that to what they're building. So I think that's a perfectly valid thing to do, and it's a great vision to have. but it should never be like conflated with that actually happening, right? As far as how that's actually going to happen, so the only way I see triggering the bull market by an application or something like that is if we find out two things. One, we know a large group of users is going to be using this, meaning by some form of regulation, or some company is offering it, or some government is making it a cheaper means of transactional processing for something like maybe peer-to-peer transactions, or smart contracts that they're now implementing that are in wide scale use. So if we find out during X day something like that is going to happen, then yes, you're going to see the price skyrocket for the asset, right? Because that's going to spread towards the market. That's going to give people the signal that, hey, liquidity is definitely coming in here. Let me buy it first. And then you're going to have a race and the price is going to jump. So something like that could happen. But until you actually see those users come in, none of it is sustainable. So if I see a jump like that, more than likely part of that liquid e-gold I'm holding, I'm going to be taking a little bit of profits. And then what I'm going to be doing when it drops, like when it corrects, is buying more than I had previously, right? Yeah. That's the way that I'm going to look at it. Yeah. I'm not expecting any industry, or I'm not expecting any one of these DeFi startups, including MultiversX, to somehow change the entire market dynamic during the worst bear market of our lifetime to somehow skyrocket in value. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it happening. I don't see how they could do it. Maybe they could. And if they did, I will be the first to say, not only was I wrong, but I'm super impressed, and I'll profit from it because I own a lot of the asset, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to have any arguments. But I just think if you look at it realistically, that type of outcome from X day is just unlikely. I think we still follow the market cycle. Now, depending on the news, though, there is possibility for, even doubling of value, because right now, value-wise, it's pretty low.
Yeah, at this point, it wouldn't take too much. But I mean, still, paper appreciation is paper appreciation. Doesn't matter if e-gold falls to $8. It's like, well, 8 to 16 is still 100%.
So one of the things people ignore during these bear markets is why things get support, like on the charts. So in general, why does an asset not fall below a certain level, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really just the dynamics of supply and demand that you have to kind of look at a wider scale, right? Go from supply and demand to buyers and sellers, right? Usually you reach a level of support when you have less people selling, or you have more or less an equivalent amount of people buying and selling, right? You're not having one-sided demand in either direction, right? That's when you achieve support. So what we have seen here is that because it's in like a descending pattern on the charts, right? It's continued to descend throughout this bear market. What's happening, and this is not just MultiversX, this is pretty much the same across the board with most DeFi projects. Their charts are following a similar trend. So you start to ask yourself, okay, what does this mean in the background? Well, this means that we are starting to lose purchasing demand, right? And the people that are holding it are getting scared, and the sell demand is starting to increase, right? So just that small little deviation from the amount of buyers and sellers available starts making things go in a descending pattern. Now, let's say during X day, some news comes out that shows us, hey, there is definitely going to be some use of this. It's we're having the conversations. People have committed to X, Y, and Z. And you see this as being a definite sign of at least a certain number of users coming into the platform over the next year or over the next 6 months, right? Well, suddenly those buyers and sellers we were just talking about, you're going to immediately see a complete decline in the sellers that are in the market, and you're going to see a huge spike in the buyers that are in the market. So something like that happening could exponentially grow the price very rapidly. But then once it hits these certain levels, it flips, right? You suddenly now have, oh, well, I don't want to buy, I want it to correct. And then the sellers increase. And that's when you see these swing trading happening in markets. So recognizing that kind of teaches you, okay, well, that means that during this next bull phase, right, the ones who can control that dynamic with what they are achieving with their project, right, they're the ones who are going to succeed, right? It's not, you don't have to get a ton of people buying. You just have to get a ton of people not wanting to sell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If that happens, then the buyers have no choice but to bid up the price to force people to sell. And that's really what I think is going to end up happening with something like MultiversX. I think right now you have a lot of long-term holders, and a lot of those holders don't want to sell. You have certain portions that do sell. You have, certain things that have to be sold so that people can keep running their projects and keep funding them. And a lot of them are selling at a loss if they have to, or they're borrowing money to avoid selling. But eventually, when things start flipping around and something like X Day could do that, you might see a complete decline in the people willing to sell.
Yeah.
Right. And then you could, as the bull market starts, you're likely going to see a steady increase in the people wanting to buy. So people ask me like, oh, do you think it could go back up to $500, $600 or $1,000? Absolutely. It could easily go back to that, right? Because it's just a matter of supply and demand. And that's all that has to happen. This is a finite supply asset, just like Bitcoin, right? So it definitely has, well, finite to a certain degree, right? It may even be less than what we expect the maximum to be. But when I look at those, I'm just like, okay, there's a lot of reason for me to at least put something in here that I'm comfortable with losing, right? I don't think I'm going to lose it. I'm fairly confident I won't, but I'm willing to take the risk. I don't look at X Day or anything else like that as being the be all end all though. Dude, it's just a open forum for me to gain knowledge. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So as we approach the outro here, I just want to say, man, just such a huge thank you. Like we talked before the cameras went live about how long this might take. And hey, I respect your time. If you were here for 10 minutes, I would have gotten everything we could have. So before I pose the final question at you, just wanted to, very much appreciate, like, I can't wait to share this with everybody out there, because I mean, seriously, like, go follow Div on Twitter, but on his YouTube, subscribe, whether to be it to his Twitter, help him pay for some of those bills. Because clearly Div has a lot of just astounding wise advice. Like, I mean, seriously, share this video with your audiences, yourself. And I'm excited to just, take notes over this and share it with everybody. So thank you again, Div.
Hey, man, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for what you do, right? Putting these things together, it's really important. And, I enjoy doing them. So it's kind of like anyone else who ever wants me to do something like this, if they ask me, I'll probably accept. And you saw, it's kind of hard for me to work out the time. Like I travel a lot on weekends for work. Yeah.
I mean, you only charged me 50 eagled, and that was a good price. Just kidding. All right, Div, I've got one final question before we kind of, do any sort of summary and wrap up. It is the big one. Just, I want to pick your brain, what is the multiverse? And that's what we're going to end with today. I want to hear, what is the multiverse to you?
That's a pretty loaded question. So you're talking about in physical terms or in digital terms?
Well, I mean, I part of me wants to just like say nothing and leave it, but and also I'm piggybacking on Benjamin a little bit here, because he talks about how the MultiversX name came out of this like coexisting of, like, we have our digital world, we have our real world. So that's kind of what the question is piggybacking off of, is what is the multiverse, and also what is the multiverse from a standpoint of almost a representation of the future, if you can kind of expound on that, or if I can detail a little bit more about what exactly the question might be.
Sure. I'll explain it like this. I think the multiverse, it could be a representation of the past, it could be a representation of the future, or it could just be a representation of everything that exists, right? The theory is that there is the potential for, in our reality, for there to be parallel universes, right? This is really going into now theoretical physics for the most part, right? If that's true, what does it mean? Does it mean that in every parallel universe, there's a duplicate of ourselves? We don't know, right? We have no way to know that. It could just be independent universes that are all occurring. Time is occurring simultaneously within them. And maybe the laws of physics are the same. Maybe they're different or whatever. But in reality, when you look at it like that, a universe in itself, our understanding of it, we're like the atoms in that universe. We're the particles in the actual size of the entire thing. So this just means that existence can be existence doesn't have to happen all at once, right? If you look at the theory, it could be happening in many different ways. And if there are duplicates of ourselves, you could be living many different lives. And who knows if that connects to one soul? Like, we really don't understand it. So when I look at it physically in the theoretical physics sense, that's what I think of as the multiverse. It's been represented in Marvel movies and other stuff like that. Then I look at it digitally and I'm like, how does this now tie in? Well, it's showing me that digitally, the multiverse is a representation of different values and ecosystems and lives occurring simultaneously within one reality. So if I look at MultiversX, right, what does that name mean to me for the branding? Well, it really means that we have one underlying blockchain, which is reality. And within that blockchain, you have different existence of ecosystems, different use cases for how it's going to be applied. And that's, why I think the X is in a place where you'd normally see an exponent, right? It could be multiverse squared, cubed, to the third power, to the 10th power, to the 15th power. It just depends how this grows. And then at the end of the day, it's all on one reality. So it's almost like the name is like a representation of the OSI layer too. Like you have a base layer, and then you build upon that base layer, right? You have the application layer, presentation, transport, security, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? I haven't studied it for a long time, but it kind of goes into that same thing, even in engineering, the concepts. So I like the name. I've always enjoyed the name because of this, right? I read a lot about physics and quantum mechanics and all that kind of stuff too. So because I understand that to some degree, like, I'm not a physicist, but I understand enough of it that I'm like making these parallels and I'm like, okay, it's a cool name. It doesn't really fall off the tongue right away. I wasn't super happy with the rebranding when it occurred because I liked the name Elrond, but I understand the name. I get the purpose of it. I see the vision that they're trying to apply into the branding, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that answer. And, just to break the fourth wall just a little bit, obviously we have been talking about MultiversX. And yeah. I mean, you expanded your answer to include that brand, but I liked what you said first, because the question was, what is the multiverse? Not what is MultiversX and how do you feel about the rebrand? Obviously, you shared about that. But that's why I brought up this question, is for insights such that you just shared with us, not so much with MultiversX, the brand, the blockchain, but the idea of reality and existence and parallel universe. And it's a question that's supposed to leave the audience, thinking, because it certainly will leave me thinking, as it has for, I don't know, I guess just really since the past year. But obviously, since the rebrand, like I've, Googled multiverse and I've seen multiverse and I've even heard people use the word multiverse in real life. And obviously that's not obvious, but like, I'll tell you, that wasn't even in the world of a Web3 crypto conversation. It's just like somebody says it and it's like interesting. Like this concept of the multiverse, it's a little bit innate, or however you want to say it. Yeah, man, that was a great response. I think you couldn't have answered it better. Go ahead.
So if for any reason parallel universes exist, and let's say there are an infinite number of them, and in each of them, those universes, because they're parallel, right, they exist in the same reality, but they're parallel. The theoretical physics of it is that we could have duplicates of Earths, and time moves in the same scale, and that could lead to the same human beings being born. If there's an infinite number of versions of yourself in this reality, you just can't see them, right? That means that the best version of everyone exists somewhere. It's already there. It exists somewhere. And I'd have to think that if parallel universes do exist, right, on some level, you and all those versions of yourself are connected somehow.
Yeah, most definitely.
I've thought about this too. There are times that I'll have dreams, and like at night, I'm sleeping and I have a dream, and it's like there's people I don't know that I see in the dream, and I'm like, who's this person? I've never seen this person. And I'm like talking to them as if I know them, or things are happening that just don't make any sense. And I'm like, okay, is it just being made up by my brain, or is this some way of connecting with something else that actually exists out there on a deeper level of consciousness? Now, if you do think that way, we'll turn it into something positive. right? Positive outlook of this is whatever you consider to be the best version of yourself already exists, right? And in some way, you're connected to that.
Beautiful.
All you have to do now is hit your goals. That's it. You've already done it somewhere else. You can do it here too. It's already been proven that it can be done. So nothing's really standing in the way of anything.
Yeah, I love that, man. And yeah, I'd say that's a pretty darn good way to end this segment of the podcast. And I'll give you a second if you want to shout out anything, your own channel. I mean, I already did a few times, but yeah, I mean, anything going on in your life you want to tell the people about or direct them to get more of your content?
Oh, it's pretty easy. YouTube.com/DivXMaN or @crypto_div on Twitter. That's it. Hit me up if you'd like, follow if you'd like, watch if you'd like. I don't gain much out of it. So if you gain something out of it, then join in. Otherwise, it's all good.
Awesome. Well, Div, it's been beyond a pleasure to sit here and listen to your perspectives and your wisdom and advice. And I thank you so much for your time. And yeah, man, thank you again.
Yeah, no sweat, man. Thank you. I appreciate you doing this, dude.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll continue on with the episode here, and we'll say our goodbyes to Div. So bye, Div.
Take it easy, dude. Take care, everyone.
All right, everybody. We are back. Just you and me here to close out the show. So, are you kidding me? Did you enjoy that conversation with Crypto Div and I as much as I enjoyed it? These are the notes that I was taking during the chat. You probably can't see that, but I was just so much enjoying the conversation that I had with Crypto Div, and I'm here to say that is going to be the nature of the Multiverse Experience podcast from here on out. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know how you would see these videos kind of being better or improved. Maybe you want to hold off on some of the other topics until after the conversation. But I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably going to likely depend on how quality of the conversation is with my guest each of these episodes. So again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Crypto Div, for all of the words of advice, the wisdom, the insight that you gave us in that conversation. You, listener, if you want to be featured on the show, if you feel like you have things that you want to say, insights you want to give, perspectives to share, drop me a DM either on the MultiversX Experience podcast Twitter, or if you would just want to send me a DM at The Economistic, I will be there and happy to entertain a conversation with you. Like I said, season 2 of the Multiverse Experience podcast is basically a brand new thing. I'm running this thing solo, so that means I got to figure out how to fill the time. So please let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you think might be most important for the viewers to check out. But that's really all I got for you today. Thank you again for everybody. Like, comment, let me know you're there, and I will see you on the next one. Economistic out.